Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the Gin and Tonic Show. Today we will be talking about blasphemy, likely committing it as well. Joining me today is the Rationalizer and the Klingschor. The Klingschor. Rationalizer and Klingschor. I, of course, am your host, Almighty Atheismo. Thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to join the panel to make an observation, comment, or ask a question, it could be about the topic of the day or a topic of your own choosing. Just send a Skype contact request or message to the Gin and Tonic Show on Skype. And if you come onto the show, make sure that you mute or minimize, preferably turn off your Blog TV, shut your browser down altogether so you don't hear yourself on an echo and become disoriented, which disrupts the flow of the show. Also, everyone who calls in is advised that we are recorded for later upload on YouTube and also broadcast live here on Blog TV. So, blasphemy, for or against. By the way, did anyone see... I don't know how many people are in the States. Did anyone see this garbage on Newsweek's cover? Heaven is real. I mean, Rash and Kling, of course, are overseas, so I'm just going to talk to people in the chat and just wait for the delay for the response, which always makes good, compelling viewing. But there's this guy, some asshole, and he says, "Oh, heaven is real. I was in a brief coma and I saw it." And I thought, that's bullshit, I mean, I looked at the date and I thought I was in heaven at the same time and I didn't see him there. I mean, this guy's story just doesn't check out. But, yeah, it's ridiculous what people will believe. I mean, the last time I saw a heaven is real thing, it was a little kid who had a near-death experience, and it was Fox News, of course, playing up for Christian conservatives, saying that heaven is real, and it's just it's appalling what people will believe. I mean, Newsweek used to be good, if I'm thinking of the same paper, and I'm right about that. I was just appalled. Rationalizer. In other news, big round of applause for the Taliban. I mean, I can just imagine. I don't know how many of you are kept up with this story. I can just imagine them all in a situation room, like at a military situation room with the transparent radar, screen, and everyone's got their headsets on, and someone says, "Yeah, the mission is a go. It's successful. We shot a little girl in the head," and then everyone's like giving the golf applause and cheering like they just launched a rocket into fucking outer space. I mean, that I guess is a major military objective for them is just to shoot a little girl in the fucking head.
They're talking of shooting people in the head and shooting people into space. I'm just looking for the exact words now. I can't see it, but Ricky Gervais did a tweet, and it said something like, "Dear religion, today I safely parachuted a man from outer space safely down to the ground. You shot a girl in the head for wanting to learn to read. Yours, Science."
Yeah.
I saw that. Classic.
Yeah. Fucking hell. I mean, what? And then Kling and I were overlooking this thing about Pakistani journalists threatened by Taliban. Taliban upset or dissatisfied with the way the news was being covered and the way they were being portrayed. And then you got literally comments, quotes from Taliban spokesmen saying, "Hey, those guys just aren't telling both sides of the story. That little girl had it coming." And they really are. They're really standing the ground. And I guess they are under some pressure because they've just stirred up such anger against
negative press spin, really. Yeah. And I didn't like that picture he put of me in the newspaper. It didn't portray me in a flattering light, right?
I can imagine a reporter standing there saying, "And in today's news, the Taliban have shot a girl in the head, understandably, because the evil Jinn-possessed girl deserved it."
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say. They say, "Look, we warned the little girl repeatedly. We warned her. We tried to play nice. I don't know how am I the fucking bad guy here." And then other girls were also shot. Now, does anyone remember? Did they board the bus or did they just spray it with fire?
I don't know. How did they notify her? They didn't send her a letter, did they?
No, they like put out messages to in general, just like yeah, you know how they do. They
Probably just sent her a tweet or something.
yeah,
Era. Taliban on tar.
Yeah, at little girl.
If you can read this, you need to duck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, the thing is, they a couple other girls were shot as well. So I mean, the guys, I can just imagine him just point blank and he can't even aim. He's like, hold on, sorry everyone, let me try again. I don't know if anyone watches the more off the beaten road Monty Python, but there's the one sketch where the guy's before the firing squad and they don't know which part of the site to look, so they just repeatedly miss him.
No, I haven't, but whatever. Sounds awesome.
I'm just gonna swap to another computer because my mic on this is crap.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
So anyway, sorry about my irrelevant stuff, but yeah, blasphemy.
So good.
We might be joined by a guest. We don't know if we had a scheduling conflict, but we might be joined by a guest who got into trouble with his school over an issue that was considered blasphemy, or at least politically incorrect speech, creating a hostile climate for some people.
Muslims.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, did I just have like a bit of a cough? Oh,
Yeah.
That's peculiar. I mean, not that like I can appreciate, anti-Muslim bigotry, Muslims feel under attack, but fucking, I mean, bloody hell, like. This doesn't justify the faux outrage and the persecution complex, and is it like I get yes, generally due to socioeconomic conditions and so on and so forth, people have a negative bias and are bigoted towards Muslims. That doesn't mean that you can get butthurt over a fucking pineapple.
Yeah.
Named Muhammad, like it's I don't see it's just idiotic, just the extremes that they go to, like, oh my god, just the faux outrage.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Yeah, I mean, these are out. Things like what I was talking about with the bus shooting with the Taliban. These are outlying examples, but it never ceases to amaze me. How any criticism is immediately like an octopus or a squid that gets startled and it just sprays the ink in your face. Like, no matter what criticism, if you startle a rank and file member of the religion or an apologist, you just immediately get sprayed with that ink. It's like, well, you must be a bigot. That's the only explanation. I remember I saw this one clip of this apologist who said they asked him, why do you think that there's such a low opinion of Islam and in many societies today, or I think he specified the West or the U.S. or something, and he said, well, the economy has been really bad lately, and I think people just really need a scapegoat. I thought, wow, what color is the sky in this guy's friggin' world? I mean, like I said.
I think people do need a scapegoat, and that plays a big role. But I think that it's a scapegoat with some substance. Like,
if the economy,
if it wasn't for the Taliban and all the bombings on U.S. ships and embassies and 9/11 and 7/7 and Al Qaeda and the Iranian Revolution and the Salman Rushdie fatwa and Sayyid Qutb and all these terrorist groups and bombings everywhere and all this shit going on, then people would have chosen a different scapegoat.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, that's a good point. Yes, every society under the sun scapegoats some other party to one degree or another. But what pushed them to the front of the queue? It used to be, it was like, oh no, the Mexicans are going to take over. Oh, the Chinese are going to take over. It's like, I miss the good old days of those, various sundry forms of xenophobia instead of just one monolithic form of xenophobia that prevails today. It's like, we need to team up with the Mexicans and the Chinese to stop the goddamn Muslims. That's all you hear today, and it's just nauseating. Yeah, I mean, I thought just. By the way, Rash, we can't hear you. Does that asshole who made that comment, does he think that if economic times were good, people would not care if these stories were on the radar? I mean, granted, the West never paid attention to any kind of news story prior to all the war on terror nonsense. But if someone got you just imagine someone in Manhattan on their way to the stock exchange reading their paper, and they see the thing or hear a news story and about a girl getting shot in the head, and they think, oh well, I'm just making too much goddamn money to care. I mean, under how good does the economy need to be?
Yeah.
How good is the economy
Before
need
your
to be where
morality
people are
is
okay
that
with
good.
that kind of thing? That's just ridiculous.
Crime in the streets. Wait, I'm making 12 point percentage. I'm all right. Yeah, I can live with that.
Am I audible yet?
Well, I'm not sure. Depends how you define audible. If you mean distant and hard to understand, then yes, you are.
Oh,
You just can't win. You just can't win, Rash, man.
No, and it should. I'm sorry.
just not Allah's will.
It's a Allah's
Yeah.
will. Granted, it should be noted that things like that are definitely outlying examples, and Pakistan is just enraged by these actions. No matter what kind of rhetoric the Taliban would try to use to justify it. So not to make a knee jerk toss of a bone towards political correctness, but it must be stated just for out of accuracy. This isn't everyone. It's far almost the opposite. But when we talk about the sort of contrast between different societal models, certainly Muslims I should say Muslim apologists, they never have a problem judging the other civilizations by their outlying examples. You know what I mean? Even if they have to dredge things up from the very distant past. And there's already like some of the loony people in like small third parties that are saying, oh well, this is just the CIA. The CIA, dressed up in a costume and shot the girl, and now that's just to justify drones and so forth.
I don't understand why
There
Muslims...
was a story though, wasn't there? Do you remember that in Afghanistan, some American soldiers had dressed up, put turbans on, driving around in an unmarked car, shooting people, and they got caught by the Afghan police, or was it Iraq? I think it was Afghan. And they were put in the prison, and then the US military come and broke them out. I mean,
I remember hearing that story, and back when I was a conspiracy theorist who believed in the New World Order, I used that as evidence that, fucking control mechanisms, war, yo. But I actually don't know if it's true.
Yeah, I wanted to check that out. I mean, there are cases where individual soldiers go nuts for the things that they see, and I'd have to look.
Obviously, it depends on whether it's state sanctioned or not. If there's, for example, there was was it an Iraqi police officer who shot all of the Americans? They were in the police station or in the grounds or something, and then he turned around and shot a lot of what should have been his own side. Different people. Obviously, the Iraqi police didn't sanction him shooting the other Iraqi police. Yeah. So it depends on whether it's state sanctioned or not.
Take a deep breath.
I'm kind of interested, though. I would be interested to know, because it's war, and if I wanted, if I was in somewhere like Iraq, and I wanted to stop the people uniting and fighting me, ideally I'd want them fighting each other. So all you need to do is plant a bomb in someone's mosque or someone's shopping centre or something, and then it blows up, and blame it on the Shias, and then they go and blow the Shias up and blame it on the Sunnis, and then the next thing you know, they'll all be killing each other, and you'll just be, much safer than you were, I suppose. Much more free to exploit some oil.
The funny thing is that they actually don't need to pretend to be a Shia to kill a Sunni or pretend to be a Sunni to kill a Shia, because the fucking Shia and Sunni are already doing it for them.
Yeah. I mean, well, the thing is, it looks bad. If you're trying to market yourself as a force for stability, then that's actually the last thing you want, no matter how sinister your supposed plans are. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's the thing about conspiracy theories is the goals of the people being charged with the conspiracy, they never make any real sense. You know what I mean? It's like
I control everything, and so I'm going to destroy it all.
Yeah,
YOLO.
exactly. I'm gonna set fire to my own lawn. You know, I mean, the thing is, the thing is, it's like people will say, "Oh, there's this agency that controls everything, and they want chaos." And I thought, why? I mean, it's like if there was, it would make sense if they had one group, and then they caused chaos outside of what they controlled. But why would they cause? And that doesn't make any sense. You just want to. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. If you, it's like when people talk about Iran having nuclear weapons and assuming that they're going to just launch them and blow lots of people up straight away, and you know, maybe I'm missing something, but as far as I know, at the moment, the people in control of Iran are in control of Iran. Mm-hmm. If they launch missiles, people would launch missiles back. And from that point on, you'd basically have lots of people living in anarchy, and the people that are in control of launching the missiles would no longer be in control of anything, and they've kind of screwed their lives up for themselves, really. I mean, they'd have to seriously be someone who believed that they should shoot a missile and then would go to heaven. They'd seriously have to believe that. And it is possible. But then, you know, it's possible in the US as well, isn't it? You could get someone that believes he's bringing about the end of time or something by launching a missile. You can get a bit of a nutter anywhere, really. But yeah, I don't really buy it. Iran, you know, they can't have nuclear weapons because they'll blow up the entire world. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Well, I'd be worried more about an arms race between them and the various Sunni countries on the peninsula and the Levant.
Actually, that's really funny because that is like if there were a war against Israel and Iran, you know who all the Arab countries would support, not freaking Iran. I mean, I think that's actually probably subtly the bigger threat in the region.
Yeah.
It's not Israel versus Iran. It's Iran versus Saudi Arabia. Iran versus, you know, these Gulf Arab states and co.
Yeah. Normally, if you're a third party and two longtime rivals are fighting each other, you're happy. But that might be a situation where they would just be grinding their teeth in frustration, saying that there's just no good option. They might just sit it out.
Shall we talk about miswax?
Oh, the whacking sticks?
Yeah. Because I've been reading through Tom Holland's book, and I finally got to the end. And, you know, I'm not going to do a book review. His argument is a bit difficult to get the hang of, but I think I got there in the end. But what I found interesting was towards the end, he talks about how the Jews had their oral tradition, which they later wrote down as the Talmud, and that to give anything authority, all people would ever do is claim a chain of narrators all the way back to Moses, and then all of a sudden it's sanctioned by God and everyone has to abide by it. And he was talking about how places like Persia were basically Arab dominated rather than Muslim dominated, and these people who were first and second generation born into Muslim rule were obviously seeing becoming a Muslim as an attractive option. If you become a Muslim, you become one of the masters rather than one of the slaves, which kind of wasn't good for their power hold. So, you know, they were trying to come up with ways of keeping the Arabs in control. And
but this is normal. This is already known to everyone. This is what the Umayyads did.
Yeah, it is the Umayyads he's talking about. But the interesting thing then is throughout the time there had been various points where the masses had rose up against the authorities and tried to install some form of communism to make the population as equal as the masters. And one of the useful tools for doing this, obviously, would be not through the words in the Quran itself, but understanding what they really mean. So, you'd have people trying to set themselves up as, rather than a messenger of God, God's advocate on earth, or the deputy of Muhammad, in order to explain what Muhammad meant when he said those words. And then, of course, if you take it further, you can copy the Jewish tradition of isnads and claiming that Muhammad said this, and as long as you could come up with a good recital chain that sounded authentic, you could have people believe just about anything. But what I found interesting was that the Zoroastrians were obsessed with oral hygiene and miswaks. Apparently, the Zoroastrians they were really obsessed with it. And then you get these hadiths about how Muhammad would brush his teeth and stuff. And then even though the Quran says flogging for adultery, and it doesn't say to kill people for apostasy, but
wait,
it's done because
I'm pretty sure. What did you just say?
No. The
Quran doesn't say to kill people for apostasy.
There is one verse that's kind of indirectly kind of alludes to something similar, but there is no kind of direct thing saying if you leave Islam, kill them.
No, it says something like there awaits for them a severe punishment.
Wait, what about if they leave and then they cause mischief in the countryside, chop off their hand and foot?
Yeah, that's different, isn't it? No, I think they can be killed for mischief in the land, but that's different from just apostatizing. So if you just apostatise, it says something like there's a severe punishment for them in this world and the next. I can't remember exactly, but it doesn't say to kill them, as far as I remember.
Right.
But the Zoroastrian punishment for apostasy was death. And the Quran only clearly talks about 3 prayers a day, but the Zoroastrian practice was 5 prayers a day. And these are all the things that have come through hadiths that people now practice because it's an explanation of what was meant in the Quran. And, there are some conflicts which have to be ignored. But then, it has become pretty standard to pray 5 times a day, and to in some parts of the world to have apostates killed and adulterers killed and so on. They're not.
It became ijma. It became the unanimous consensus of the scholars of Islam. You should kill apostates.
Yeah, but it was based on hadiths.
Yes, that's right.
But didn't the pagans on the peninsula also have 5 prayers a day? Was that something that was likely influenced by Persians?
I don't know about pagans, but apparently the Zoroastrians did.
But remember, Atheismo, that any stories about the pagans having 5 prayers a day would have come from hadiths. So
yeah, but I don't know.
Whereas the records for the Persians having 5 prayers a day would not be a hadith; it would be a history, like a Persian histories, or someone recording the customs of the Persians.
I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm underestimating the ability to completely rewrite history. I mean, I know that the literature that Islam has produced runs a smear campaign against the Jahiliyyah Arabs, but I would take. I mean, given there was continuity in so many other aspects, like the facing the Kaaba, facing or the Black Stone and things like that. I guess I just figured it was a safe assumption that the portrayal of the pagan Arabs praying to the idols 5 times a day was a safe one. But I didn't know that about Zoroastrianism. I skimmed through the Avesta. I don't really know that much about Zoroastrianism, to be honest. Maybe we'll make.
Nor me. But the thing is rewriting history in this way is not a new thing. It was done all the time. And if you want people to do something, all you have to do is convince them that Muhammad had said this, and then if you could give them a good, strong chain of recital, maybe invent 2 or 3 chains of recital.
Yeah.
Then you could convince them that he really said it, and then they have to brush their teeth with a miswak or whatever it is that they wanted them to do, and. Because it's all oral, and it's not It's not written down at a point you can date it. This stuff could have easily been made up hundreds of years later. And if you trust that the person telling you, who's a person of authority, who people often trust, is saying, oh, I heard this through this companion, and his granddad told his grandson, and then they'll believe it. And they just pretend that it's always been around, and people will then recite it as if it's always been around. And there's lots of examples of it. There was I don't remember the people, but it was a nation, and they had these fires that they used to burn as a tribute to gods and stuff. And they're supposed to be eternal, but they were invaded, and the fires were put out. So when
that's the Zoroastrians. The Mazdians have the eternal fire. Yeah,
and then
they call them Mazdians, by the way. The Zoroastrians, Magians, Mazdians. Call them Mazdians because they're God's Mazda, so they follow Mazda, so they're Mazdians.
Well, I'll just call them these people because I know I'm not getting that wrong.
Persian fire worshippers.
But then they moved this fire and lit it, and then told everyone that it was an eternal fire that had always been there. And within a generation, everyone believed it. It had always been there. It's like it only moved like 20 years ago or something. Yet there's people actually believe it's always been there because people in authority are telling them it's always been there. That's the official line. And they suck it up and they fall for it. And it's absolutely bizarre.
Actually, I have something here. Here. This book here is by Ignaz Goldziher, and it's about the development of the hadith. And this man was the man who actually proved, initially amongst academics anyway, that hadiths were basically invented by Abbasids, by Umayyads, and so on and so forth. So this book is actually the proof of what you were saying.
Go on, now you're going to give me some proof, or you're flicking through pages?
Me? Oh, you want actual examples?
No, well, you know, I didn't think you was going to stop at I've got a book and it's the proof, and then shut the book.
Oh, no, Why can't I hear... Yeah, what do you mean?
You're echoing now.
I brought on our first caller. Remember, anyone wants to join the show, make sure to send a Skype contact request or instant message to the Gin and Tonic Show on Skype. Today we have Photon. Photon, what do you have for us?
Hey guys, Klingschor. I'm just wondering whether this is an accident. I can actually see you.
Oh no, I decided whatever. You know, YOLO swag.
YOLO. Yeah, you know, that's kind of unfortunate because, yeah, sometimes if you do show your face, YOLO, in the sense that you died 2 days from the next from showing your face.
No. If Thunderbolt's still alive, Pat Condell is still alive, dude, I'm fine. Like,
yeah, that's true.
The Rationalizer is still alive.
Yeah. You're not visiting the middle.
If Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens dead, but unless like some Muslim MI5 officer injected him with throat cancer, then as far as I know, it wasn't a hit. You know, so if the assassination method is natural causes, I'll take that risk.
as long as you're not riding a school bus in Swat Valley, I guess you're okay.
Yeah, if Dawkins isn't dead.
There was a Danish guy, right, who was assassinated because, you know, the thing, there's a difference between primarily insulting Christianity and primarily insulting Islam, right? If you primarily insult Islam, then you're in trouble. You're
Pat Condell, come on, Pat Condell, Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer. Yeah. These people are in public, like, they stand there, you know, they're open, like, they're still alive. So, I mean, especially considering that all I do, I didn't even commit blasphemy. I'm not even apostate. All I do is say, hey, this is what the Quran says.
And you know what? If some wealthy Saudi prince is willing to pay me to kill Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer, I've got a rifle.
Dude, if you're in the U.S., you're in so much fucking trouble. You know, they record everything. Okay. Anyway, guys. Before I jump, I thought like today we were going to talk about blasphemy, but for some reason,
that is our primary sort of.
Well, the aim is we're going to have the president of the Secular Atheist Society of the University of Reading on, and he's the guy. It was their group that was displaying a pineapple labelled Muhammad, and it got confiscated and they got thrown out. He's due to be a guest. I've just had a message from him because he's travelled up to visit his family, and it's his brother's birthday, and he's just messaged me and said, basically,
a likely story.
No, I already knew in advance, actually. And he said, I'm having a bit too much fun, so I'm letting you down. But what time do you finish? I said, around 11. And he said, I'll see you around 11 then. So it looks like he wants to come on just late.
That's fine. Yeah.
So we'll discuss blasphemy and pineapples later, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Just one small side note before we talk about some of the blasphemy stuff, right? Klingschor mentioned the text by Ignaz. I don't know how to pronounce the last name. How do you pronounce?
Tzortzis.
Tzortzis, right?
He's Hungarian.
Yeah, and that pretty much built up on the work of Joseph Schacht.
No. Schacht came afterwards.
Okay, Schacht came after. Yeah.
Schacht is the second work that was the big. See, Schacht focused on fiqh, and he pointed out that actually one of the primary motivators for creating hadiths was for jurisprudence. So, for example, the Shafi scholars invented the hadiths about stoning in order to justify having the punishment of stoning in Islam, which they actually got from Judaism, according to Schacht and Goldsmith, according to this line of thinking, and it seems pretty likely. So even the verse, especially the lost verse of the Quran, the ayat ar-rajam, the verse of stoning. This was invented by Shafi jurists in order to justify having stoning, because they thought the Quran is the penultimate authority for law, and we can't have the Quran saying lash them, and then the hadith saying stone them. We need actually a higher authority, so we say, a lost Quranic verse is where we get our authority from.
Is it really that far-fetched of a story?
No, it's not. But in this particular case, it was actually just a really convenient device that the Shafi were able to use. It's not like we just happen to have a lost verse. We happen to have a lost verse that exactly gives us the exact authority that we need for this exact law that we want. What a coincidence!
Was that the goat? That was the goat one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Aisha's goat 1 0.
No, that's a different part. That's actually that.
Wasn't that? There was a verse on stoning.
Ibn Majah records that a goat ate the stoning verse.
Okay, but there are other verses which are. But now I'm going to come out against this position that this, at least for this stoning verse, right? Now the thing is, this tradition is not just there within Sunnis; it's also there within Shiites. Now Shiites are not taking their sources from Sunnis. The Shiite official position is that the verse of stoning was there in the Quran, and this verse was actually mentioned by the sixth Imam, who predated Abu Hanifa, actually. So he actually mentioned
Jafar as-Sadiq.
Yeah, Jafar as-Sadiq. Yeah. So the thing is, while I agree with a lot of what Schacht and Godzier said about that a lot of stuff is invented later, which is absolutely clear. Like you can see them taking stuff from Judaism and other religions. And especially the people living in Iraq, because that was a really vast multicultural society, and that's where a lot of traditions came in. By the way, just like a side note, Imam Abu Hanifa, he used to live in Iraq, and he was one of the most despised personalities in Islam.
Was he Abu Hanifa?
Yeah.
How?
Okay, you see, Sahih Bukhari. The first chapter in Sahih Bukhari is called the chapter of belief. That belief is a part of action, so which is a direct refutation of Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa used to be one of the guys who used to say, no, belief is just a state of your. They used to say it hard, but like technically, it's a state of your mind. And if you have belief, you believe it. It's just because you act on the belief doesn't mean your belief becomes stronger, belief becomes weaker. And these people were called the Murjia. Murjia mean, and a lot of these people were denied, were accused of being like outside the fold of Islam. Abu Hanifa used to believe that stuff. So the internal conflict between the scholars of Islam, early Islam, is so vast and so powerful. So severe that the Hadith scholars have this terminology, have this saying that a scholar's judgment of his contemporary is not included in in the judgment for that person. So when you have hadith scholars, Rijal scholars, which say, yeah, this person is reliable, this person is reliable, this person is weak. If a Rijal scholar says that this contemporary scholar, this scholar who lived at the same time, is weak, that testimony is rejected among hadith scholars today, because they say, no, there was just so many conflicts between scholars, Rijal scholars, the early Rijal scholars, that we don't accept it. So just look it up. There are videos on YouTube. There's a video, just Google Imam Abu Hanifa was weak in hadith, right? And you see, and they just touched the tip of the iceberg. The amount of hatred these guys had for each other is unbelievable. So anyway, so the thing is, because Abu Hanifa actually lived in Iraq, and there you didn't have just all Arabs, because that was basically
those Arameans and Nestorian Christians and
because you had a vast multicultural society at that time. Imam Abu Hanifa was a really intelligent person. He used to get laws which he thought were universally applicable. So when
actually, I should put this out. This is for those who are interested. Fun fact: the fiqh, Sharia. Sharia is kind of an abstract term. I'm pretty sure that fiqh is actually kind of the practical implementation and the practical law of the. So I'm just going to say fiqh. It actually did not originate with the Quran and Hadith. It actually originated with Umayyad, with legalists and jurists during the Umayyad era, who were synthesizing Roman. There is, for example, the Hanafi madhab says that. When it comes to a man becoming mature, he gets, when he turns 21, if he hasn't yet been decided that he is mature, he automatically gets all his property given to him anyway, because by 21 he becomes de facto, has to be mature by that age. That's taken from Roman law. Abu Hanifa took that from Roman law, for example. And so the early jurists actually were simply taking Roman, Babylonian, Sasanian, Talmudic, rabbinical, all these pre-Islamic laws, and then it wasn't even based on the Quran or Hadith. They were just taking these laws and sort of Islamizing them. And then what happened was that the Al-Hadith, what is it? Al-Hadith, the people of the Hadith. These they hated the jurists, because obviously the jurists weren't following, the Quran. Hadith, they were following these pre-Islamic laws, and it wasn't until Imam Shafi that these were unified, and Imam Shafi took the methodologies of the jurists and made them fit and based upon the Quran and Hadith, and that's where we get modern fiqh, or the classical fiqh from. Fun fact.
Imam Shafi was like the first guy whose usul fiqh was, I think, the first primary collection of fiqh ever, and that's like 200 years after the Prophet died, right?
Amazing, isn't it? The Abbasid era is when the fiqh is developing, like
into the Abbasid era. Yes, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. Anyway, but let me just bring it back to the actual issue. The reason why I think that the verse of stoning might actually have been there, or was earlier, is because the Shiites had this, and the Shiites basically take 8% of the tradition from Imam Jafar Sadiq, and so the Shiites would not take their sources from Shafi. Shafi was, remember, after Jafar Sadiq. So it is, I think there might be an earlier historical precedent. It's not that Shafi made it up. So I think there is evidence for the contrary. Now, regarding this issue, since you do a lot of reading, right, Klingschor, on these issues, look at the works of Harald Motzki, Harald Motzki, Harald Motzki, right? Now, he's a German scholar on Islam. Oh, you have his books?
No, I'm just listing the 10 books that are sitting on my desk at the moment.
So the thing is, he has come up with a very powerful counter-narrative to the traditions. He doesn't think that they were created really later on. According to his thesis, they were created in the first century itself, like a majority of these, which makes sense because in the first century you had the Umayyads, and the Umayyads would want some, legal grounding for this stuff. So just Motzki, Analyzing Muslim Traditions. This is an amazing book, and he has some PDFs online as well. Just Google some of his online PDFs about...
Modzki. Yeah.
Motzki.
Yeah.
By the way, I live in Canada, so that's why.
Godzilla versus Modzki. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so this guy is he it's pretty recent scholarship, like 3 years ago and stuff, right? So he had built up on a lot of theories that have emerged. So he says it's not as late as Schacht and Godzier said. They're actually somewhat early in the first century. Much of the work was done, and then some extra additions were built on later. Anyway, so that was just like a side note that I wanted to mention. You mentioned that like a lot of laws of Islam were taken from Zoroastrianism, right? Now the thing is, it's true that there are some aspects of Zoroastrian that are part of Sunni Islam, but if you just take a look at the Shia theology, that's basically like almost like a carbon copy of Zoroastrian. Now,
yes, I mean, and the lineage, the fact that the Zoroastrians were obsessed with holy bloodlines and lineage, and Shia Islam, the Hashemi blood, yo.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't mean to throw out conspiracy theories, but obviously,
he's about to.
Well, I mean, Christians and Jews were allowed to continue practicing religion, but Zoroastrians were
Let me just put on my tinfoil hat here.
Zoroastrians and South Asian polytheists were forbidden from openly, practicing theirs, and all the fire temples were shut down. Do you think that there were some sects of Shiism that were really just underground continuations of Zoroastrianism under the nose of the Caliphate?
See, Shiism was okay. Sorry, you want to go?
I was going to say, like, it happened openly. It wasn't even conspiracy. Like Mazdaean, Manichaeism is like an offshoot from Mazdaism. Manichaeism manifested in heaps of Muslim Manichaeist fusions that were used in rebellions against the Umayyads. Like, it's not even like a secret that they fused. Like,
like I said, I think that maybe some of them weren't intended to be fusions. Maybe they were just, it's like if there was like a brutal, be Christian or die sort of government in the United States, and me and a bunch of other atheists went to a church, and then we locked the door, and then we had got out our portable atheists, and you know what I mean. You know what I mean? Do you think that I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was a lot of that going on?
Yeah, but you're right. See, remember the Zoroastrians? They were from Iran, right? Like Persia.
Yeah.
Now, remember what happens is the Sunni Caliphate. Remember, early on, there was no distinction between Sunnis and Shia. They were just like Muslims, right? So when Omar went and ravaged Persia, he basically took over the Persian property. Obviously, those Iranians, the Persians, were not happy about this.
No. Umar didn't take it. What Umar did, this is what...
Oh, sorry. Uthman.
Uthman was the one who took all their property and began to give it, because Umar wanted to keep all the Arabs separate. So he didn't want the Arabs to have any land, so that the Arabs couldn't become sedentary and settle down. He wanted the Arabs to remain a perpetual warrior caste. In their colonizing cities. Yeah, sorry. Uthman. No.
But the thing is, Omar did lead some conquests against the Persians, right?
He was the main one who conquered Persia. But it was Uthman who gave out all the property.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is, the Persians who had this lifestyle imposed upon them, they had a completely new ruler. They were defeated. Remember, these Persians had empires at that point over 1,000 years old. So these guys weren't spring chickens like the Muslims were, the Muslim Empire. And so what happened is the Shiites come at that point, after Ali passes away, his son Hussein gets killed, and that's where the first Shiite impulses start being formed. So the actual the core Shiite that we see right now. So those are the proto-Shiites at that point. So what happened is the Shiites go and say, hey, these rulers of yours are the ones who have been fucking us over as well for a long time. So the Persians, they were called the Mawali, or the clients.
Oh yeah. Client Arabs.
Yeah, so they were not. They weren't given the same social respect. The Arabs were the true Muslims, and the Persians were the Mawali. So
they were second-class citizens, even though they converted to Islam.
Yeah. So the Shiites said, these Arab motherfuckers, they screwed you over, but they screwed us over too. So the Persians were more sympathetic towards the Shiites, and that's where a lot of Persian, where a lot of Zoroastrian theology, theological ideas crept into Shiism much more than they did into Sunnism, because the Persians were more likely to side with the person who they thought was as oppressed as they were by the rulers at that time. So this is why, if you open for Sunnis, we know the primary books are Bukhari and Muslim, but for Shia, the main compendium, the primary book of hadith is Kitab al-Kafi. Now, al-Kafi, the first chapter of the book is Kitab al-Aql wal-Jahl, which is the book of intelligence and ignorance. Now, and you read through those to the hadiths in those chapters, and you see them time after time coming up with those distinctions between, hey, this is the army of goodness and this is the army of ignorance. And in the army of goodness, you have such and such soldiers, which is basically they're anthropomorphizing ignorance and knowledge, which is pretty much what you had in Zoroastrianism, except they call them light and darkness. So. And
it was a dualistic universe.
Yeah, exactly. And even in the Shia tradition, you see time after time, you see repeated the claim that the first creation ever made, awwal khalaqallahu nuri. So that's where Muhammad says the first thing that God created was my light. He doesn't say my creation, he says my light, and from my light, the light of Ali and his followers were split up. So if you actually want to see strong Zoroastrian influence, look at the Shiite beliefs, and you see the whole light darkness split and the ignorance and knowledge split. It's right there in Shiism. So that's why you have a stronger theological influence on Shiism because of Zoroastrianism, just because they were oppressed by the caliphs who were considered Sunni at that time.
So I mean, it sounds like with all the emphasis on light versus darkness that they took Allah and interbred him with Ahura Mazda.
Right, are these guys pigeon breeders?
They're Pokemon.
Yeah, it's true.
I'm gonna take Allah to the Pokemon breeding center, and I'm gonna take a Ditto, and together I can get an Allah egg, even though Allah is the legendary, right? No, okay.
The only difference is for shit. I'm not 100% sure about whether the Zoroastrian at that time believed that there was just light was God or light was a manifestation of God. But Shiites believe that that God created light as the first thing, and then He ordered darkness to separate from light, which kind of doesn't make sense. How to get darkness is separate from light.
When did He create the darkness? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the thing is, but the Shiite believes that God ordered, created light, and light was given preference over darkness because light moved towards God, but darkness moved away from God. So it's and then the people of light became the Shiites, and the people of darkness became the army or the Sunni. So basically, that's Shiite. So it's kind of funny how Shiites had no actual identity. They used to take stuff from anyone who was opposed to the Sunnis at that time. So when the Shiites got in touch, were in contact with the Jews of Iraq, they started you see in Shiite literature lots and lots of references of Ali having the Ark of the Covenant with him, Ark of the Covenant. No, this is not a joke, right? You read the Shia literature and you see the Shias talking about how you can recognize a true successor of the Prophet because the true successor of the Prophet has the relics of the earlier prophets. And the relics of the earlier prophets are the Ark of the Covenant, which, it's just crazy. It hadn't existed for, 800 years. And they also had the staff of Moses, and the camel that he rode on was the camel of Saleh, which was this is an Arabic story and stuff. So don't worry about that. But anyway, so you see references among the Shiites of in the hadith literature about them having every imam had this chest in which he had the Ark of the Covenant, he had the Staff of Moses, he had some the articles belonging to previous prophets, and that's how you knew that he was the right successor of Muhammad. So this is crazy talk, right? But you see, Shiites were trying to find an identity, and they used to take this nonsense from every other sect they could, and they tried to combine it into a cohesive whole. But Shiism is so fucked up; it's unbelievable. No part of it is in coherence with other parts of it. And you think like, hey, maybe Sunnism is bad, like the way their sects fight among each other, right? But Shiism is much worse.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like so much of the doctrine of Shiism it sets itself up almost purely as an opposition movement to Sunnism. But what your mention of the Ark of the Covenant made me think of the scene at the end of Raiders, where it's like, enough about nuclear weapon, enough about your nuclear weapons program, President Ahmadinejad. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? And he's like, you know how he is. He's like, well, it's being studied by top men. Well, where is it? I told you, it's being studied by top men. And then you see them, carted into the warehouse and put it away.
Well, if he's got the Ark of the Covenant, he doesn't need a nuclear missile. He just all he has to do is go somewhere, open it, and close his eyes.
You know what he should do? He should just broadcast it, global satellite television.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and then he says quickly in Farsi, he says, okay, everyone who understands this language, close your eyes, and then everyone else just dies.
Yeah. But then again, you get millions of blind kafir still alive, wouldn't you?
You just hunt them down and.
Yeah, they'd be outnumbered, wouldn't they, by then?
Yeah.
With the Shia, that they claim, it's true that they claim that the stoning verse is missing. I've heard this.
Yes. The thing is that, Shiites are much more ignorant about their hadith than the Sunnis because, they don't have the translation and stuff online.
Can I ask you something? Yeah, because I've been searching around for Shia hadith collections, and it doesn't seem like they have. This it's not like clear cut. I mean, the Sunnah are like, here's 6 books.
Here's the thing: the Shia collect everything.
Yeah.
They don't have like an authentic and an inauthentic. They just have massive freaking collections of every hadith. And
it's the thing is the Shiites don't come to an agreement on what is authentic. Every Shiite author, when they collect their sources, they think is authentic. So the 4 primary Shiite books, the authors believe that they are actually authentic. Every single one is authentic. The problem is no Shiites, there has never been a consensus on what is authentic, what is not authentic among Shiites. Like I told you, there's such discordance within Shiites. They have no the earlier scholars, the majority of the earliest scholars believe that the Quran that we have right now isn't the real Quran. There were extra verses in the Quran talking about how Ali was the successor of the Prophet and so on. But then they were removed by Omar and Uthman when they compiled the Quran. So that's what they used to believe. Now it's very politically incorrect to believe that. So they say, this Quran is right, even though some of the earliest scholars believed otherwise. So now the issue. There are 4 primary Shiite books, the 4 major books. It's Al-Kafi, Kafi, and the second one is a little complicated because it's a long name. It's but the short version of the name is Al-Faqih, Faqih. But it's the full name is Malla Yahdaruhu Al-Faqih, which is for whom a jurist is not present. And the third one is At-Tahdhib, and the fourth one is Tibsar. But anyway, so these are the 4 primary Shiite books. None of them have been translated except Al-Kafi, which was recently translated maybe a couple of years ago. But to buy it, you have to spend maybe £400. So
so these are available online or over the counter?
No. See, the Arabic versions are obviously available, right? But the English version, Al-Kafi, Kitab Al-Kafi, there are parts of it that are translated that are online, very poor translation, and some of the hadiths are missing and stuff. But you cannot access them online. The only way you can, the only one of these books that is actually available, whose translation is available, is Al-Kafi, which is the most important book, and you have to pay a whole lot of money for it.
So everything was written in Arabic as a liturgical language, even though they were compiled in Persia, right?
See, the thing is, the greatest Shiite scholars, they're all Arabic because nobody paid attention to any. But now you have Persian scholars writing in Persian about Islam, but back then, no, you didn't. No Persian. Arabic was the official language, so you couldn't do anything in Persian. So yeah, everything is in Arabic. It's very difficult to get your hands on Shia literature, but there are some good introductory texts on Shiism, which are Shiism by Heinz Halm. Halm, and Shiism, Shiism. So that's a pretty good text, and a more comprehensive introductory text on Shiism is by Mujen Momen, Momen or something. I have it here, but anyway, it's like there are two very good introductory texts. Shiism is fairly more complicated because there isn't a consistent narrative for Shiism. Shiism was pretty much in response to developed in response to Sunni ideology. So you see it changing all the time. It changed significantly, even like 40 years ago when the Iranian Revolution happened, 30 years ago. So it's so Shiism is constantly in flux. So it's the problem with Shiism. It's difficult to get a grasp on some of the basic tenets.
All right, I'm bringing in our second caller. I'm just going to leave Photon in for the moment. We have Robert, and he wants to talk about the differences between how modern Islam and Christianity are compared and contrasted and viewed with one another. So, just take a moment for him to connect. But yeah, that was always the thing with I knew that there were. I mean, we all know if anyone's looked at this. That the Shia also have rival hadiths, and I've heard that many of them are just the same with different chains of narration because they just don't like certain people and will not take a hadith that has a chain of narration with one of their political adversaries. But it doesn't seem like there's any real agreement as to what the pecking order is. The way there's a clear pecking order with Bukhari, Muslim, and then the other four.
Surely they're not on strong grounds if they're saying that the word of an infallible, all-powerful God was put in a book and a bit went missing.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that went missing that we know about. As Rumsfeld would have said, there are the unknown unknowns.
No, but the thing is, they don't say it went missing. They say it's nasqat tilawa, which means it's part of the Quran, but tilawa means recitation. But for some reason, Muhammad commanded them not to recite that verse from the Quran anymore, which is crazy. Like, why would God reveal a particular verse and then command you not to recite that verse? So they make up stuff.
Because he came out with something better.
No, but the thing is,
the Quran says, we do not take away a verse unless to replace it with something equally as good or even better.
Okay, here's...
One second. Is no God, can you stop breathing so heavily into the bloody microphone?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll stop. Let's all stop our nonsense because we have a new caller on. Robert, thank you for joining us. Go for it. What do you have for us?
Sure. My question's pretty simple. I'm of the opinion, and I could be wrong in this, and I fully accept that Islam appears to be portrayed both in popularist media and on avenues such as YouTube, perhaps by people like Pat Condell or Thunderfoot, as having greater radical elements, and the elements being far more abundant within Islam than they are within Christianity. And what I'd like to know from you is that a correct portrayal of Islam, or am I really getting the short end of the stick and am misinterpreting what I'm seeing?
Okay, well, let me say, aside from, I'm not going to sign off on what any one other personality has said because sometimes they, I just wouldn't. You know what I mean? I'd rather, not be held accountable for specific claims. But I would say that in general, the characterization that at this time there is more radicalism, especially violent radicalism in Islam. I would say it is, hands down. You do occasionally. I mean, first of all, there's lots of intolerant people. There's lots of intolerant people in various religious cliques, but you just break down the numbers of how many crazy Christians are blowing up abortion clinics and how many extremist Muslims are shooting little girls in the head, and it's not difficult to do the math. So it is more than just a characterization. I mean, let's face it. If hopefully that other guest will join us, but he the pineapple guy. You can if he had started out by putting a pineapple and saying this is Jesus the pineapple, yeah, people would have gotten offended, but it wouldn't have been the virulent reaction that he got. I mean, nobody realistically dies over that stuff. Christianity has been defanged and declawed to a large extent. That doesn't mean that the threat is gone. And I would say that
except in Africa.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that
I think
really...
that's actually something that people forget. most Muslims live in the third world. Islam is a third world religion. So this is like, in Africa, Christianity is psycho. They are killing children who they think are witches. They are killing gay people.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
it's...
Okay, I just wanted to mention one thing. Yes, Robert, that it is true. That yes, Islam is worse than Christianity and other religions today. But that's because the simple factor is education. Look at the literacy standard among Muslims. Look at the education. How many Muslims do you think have a university degree? Like 1%, 2%. I don't know. I'm exaggerating here, but the thing is, it's. Yes, right now it is true. I think unfortunately the media gives a lighter version of Islam than is actually true, because whenever there's something wrong about Islam, they say, no, that's what this particular group believes, but there are other Muslims who believe otherwise. But then when something good happens about Islam, like some Muslim scholars come out and say, for example, some academic Muslim back in history, right? They come out and say,
or the collective ulama of India saying that terrorism is un-Islamic and that no one should do terrorism, for example.
Yeah. So, and then they say, "Oh no, that's Islam." The people who are opposed to it, they're actually not part of Islam. They're radicals. So there's a dichotomy here in which you see the good part of Islam being represented as authentic Islam, and the bad parts of Islam being represented by a radical fringe of Islam.
But this is only in the liberal media. Conservative media does the opposite. They'll take some radical things and say, yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I watch a lot of liberal media. I get offended by that. I'm like, is there anyone who actually says stoning is actually part of Islam, or death for blasphemy is actually part of Islam? Except for conservative. Yes, I do agree that. Yes, I don't watch Fox, or I don't watch Hannity and Limbaugh, so I don't really. I watch a lot of liberal TV, so I see that them saying, no, this is only just a small group of people in Islam, 1%, and that's it. But it's actually. But anyway, that's true. I think the problem is that Islam is worse, but it's because no one's educated. I
think no one's educated because they live in underdeveloped countries.
That's right, and that's why
it's third world. So that's it. Because third world Christianity, third world Islam are crazy and bad. But if you look at first world Islam, i.e., in Bosnia or Albania, apart from the Saudi influences that came in during the war there, I mean, the people there are mostly secular. You look them up and they're fine. Albanian Muslims, Google images, and they just, look, sometimes the girls are wearing hijabs. They're just ordinary people playing soccer, la la la. Commercialism, capitalism, woohoo.
I suppose it really depends on what the consensus opinion of the religion is. So if you look at people in the UK who are Christians, and you ask them about the Old Testament and all the killing in it, and one answer that I received from a friend once was that the Old Testament is the fallible human recollection of actions by a God they didn't understand. So, when you put in that much uncertainty, basically you can look at absolutely anything and say, well, it probably didn't happen like that, and if it did happen like that, it's probably not what he meant to do, and he probably meant something else, blah, blah, blah. It can mean whatever you want it to mean. If you get like an African Christian from some poor country,
Uganda,
some poor part of Africa, and they look at this stuff and it's all about stoning people and everything, they don't probably go for the Jesus came so that we could eat bacon sandwiches philosophy. Which confuses me. Jesus came. You now don't have to stone people. You don't have to kill them for apostasy or blah blah blah. You can work on the Sabbath. You can now eat bacon sandwiches, but you can't have sex outside of marriage. But no, I don't want to go into Christianity. But anyway, then it gets mixed with the local folklore of witches and things like this, which is why they're starving their children and throwing acid on them and stuff. But then you can have, because it's a lot more flexible in what exactly it is, whether it's the exact word of God or not. A lot of people are more flexible in what they think it means. Then you've got the opinion on the Quran, where you've got people that believe it's the absolute word of God and must be taken literally. Then you've got people that think it's the absolute word, but it should be taken kind of poetically. And then you've got people who think it's the complete set of laws until the end of time. You've got other people who think that it was a set of laws for for a barbaric time to put them on the straight and narrow so that human morality can slowly evolve for the better over time. And, it just really, really depends on what the consensus is. And if the consensus is all the hadiths are genuine, you should stone people, it's pretty severe. But if you've got, the guy up the road from my house who thinks that it was a historic document to deal with a rough time and to set us all straight for the future, then it's not. But the problem is I think that religions tend to be more passive when they're not in the majority, because they bend to the will of the people in order to attract believers. And then when they start to outnumber the non-believers, then they suddenly become more literal and start to tell the believers what to do rather than the other way around.
Can I add one more comment? You mentioned that certain inflammatory. You mentioned some YouTubers and how. Just for example, Thunderfoot obviously became embroiled in this massive controversy for the tone and message that he took during his Draw Muhammad Day events. But no, I shouldn't describe them as his events. I mean, because it was a thing before he got involved in it. But there was this one. There was this one point where he was in a debate with. Hold on, someone's calling in. There was one point where he was in a debate with D-Land and Cole. And it was a terrible discussion because it was like two people having completely different conversations. They didn't really listen. I think they both lost the debate, to be honest. But there was one point that Thunderfoot made that I thought was valid, is that he, when he talked about comparison between Christianity and Islam, he drew a little chart, and it looked like two camel humps because it was one little bell curve representing the distribution of Christians from like a tapering off of the very liberal, then a giant hump representing the cluster of what is approximately average or moderate, and then a trailing off of people who were very right-wing and crazy. And then he drew another one in red representing Islam, and they were identical in shape, but just sort of out of phase with one another. And I think that really is my own mental image of the distribution of approximate social conservatism, religious conservatism, and tendency towards extremism. Okay, they both of them have the same approximate distribution. Where you got about 80% clustered in the middle of what seems the mean average for them, and then you have the very liberal who are very kind of wishy-washy, anything goes, and then you have the very hard line all the way up to a violent degree. It's just that what is moderate by first world Christian standards is very liberal by developing world Muslim standards, and what's conservative by the first world Christian standard is still either moderate to liberal. They're sort of out of phase. So what passes for conservative, moderate, liberal, extreme, or it's just out of tune. You know what I mean? It'd be like comparing the Daily Show often compares the political system of the U.S. and other first world countries, and Jon Stewart will say, well, the Conservative Party in Canada has won the presidency, and for those of you who don't follow Canadian politics, Jon Stewart would say their Conservative Party is equal to our liberal, hippie, communist, socialist, fluffy bunnies party, because America is so right of center compared to so many of its allies. So it's that kind of a situation. They're out of phase.
I'll summarize like this. You've got historically, you've got what the Quran and Hadith say, then you've got what the traditional scholars, like Ijma and so forth, what traditional scholars thought in the consensus throughout history. Then you've got what modern scholars would say, and then you've got what the popular sentiment of the majority of Muslims would be. Each of these is a different thing. Generally speaking, compared to Christianity, due to the fact that most Christians a huge amount of Christians live compared to first world Christianity, Islam is way more extreme. I think even compared to third world Christianity, which is just as psycho, Islam probably has the cutting edge on psycho, just with things like the Taliban. Although the Lord's Resistance Army's just as bad, I suppose. Or, I don't know, two different terrorist groups. Which one's worse? Although here's some interesting facts, just to give you some interesting facts. support for the death penalty for apostates who leave Islam in Turkey is only 5% of the population. In Lebanon, it's only 6% of the population. In Egypt, it's 84%. Jordan, it's 86%. Indonesia, it's 30%. Pakistan, 76%. Nigeria, of the Muslim population there, 51%. So it really just it's complicated. Turkey and Lebanon, pretty good.
Well, I mean, if you compare, there's one important other way that you when you contrast Christianity to Islam. If you compare the Taliban as the outliers for Islam and the Lord's Resistance Army's outliers for Christianity, in the Lord's Resistance Army, the little girl shoots you, not the other way around.
No,
so,
the little girl
Robert,
is a sex slave. The little boy shoots you.
Thank you for your question. I hope that we answered it to your satisfaction. It's certainly very
you guys did.
Okay.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.
Dankeschön.
I didn't get to compliment him on his Joker outfit that he's been wearing.
Oh yeah, he really takes a lot of pride in it. Okay, so now we have.
There was something I didn't understand about that thing with the Taliban and the little girl. Now, if they were shooting her because of going to mixed gender schools, I could maybe think something up of where that would have originated.
I thought they shooted her because she was blogging against them.
She was an advocate against them.
So basically, it's not that she wanted to go to school and learn that they shot her for. It's because she gave them bad press.
Well, she was advocating that.
Yeah, the same thing. She was like, I want to go to school, fuck the Taliban. On her blog, Taliban were like,
you don't fuck us.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, is why are the Taliban against females learning? Are they against?
I think because they're all horribly sexually repressed, and they project their horrible sexual repression onto women. Because that's
on what basis? What basis?
Okay, yeah, there actually is Islamic basis for preventing women from education. Now you will not hear about this, right? But you see,
this is a Shia hadith, isn't it? Women should not be educated.
Women should not be taught how to write. Basically, they can be taught how to read, and they can read the Quran and so on. But they're not allowed to. They shouldn't be allowed to write. They're not.
Isn't that a Shia hadith?
That's a Shia hadith, right? But
I mean, El Ghazali said something similar, I think.
Yeah,
Ghazali, to me, isn't it just a logical conclusion that they're not supposed to leave the house?
That's right. That's the whole point. They're supposed to stay within the innermost region of their house.
Homeschooling will solve everything. Religious people love homeschooling here.
What?
So they're supposed to stay at home and learn the Quran and Hadith, and the Taliban have no problem with that.
Yeah.
They go and learn like what they call Western education, by which they mean education.
Yeah.
I
love that. Yeah, Western science or science.
Yeah.
That's what you got. Yeah, sorry.
So by the way, they banned. They did shut down. They didn't just start with Malala Yousafzai. Right? They actually banned women from education in Afghanistan as well. So it's not like a new thing. They've been against education from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, but is it only? So it's the Shia hadith, and that's it.
No, Shia hadith is the one that says that don't teach women how to write. Although El Ghazali said something similar, like women should just attend to their spinning. Was El Ghazali. But I think there's a number of hadiths that say that women should stay at home and shouldn't. I mean, the fiqh is unanimous that women have to stay. If a husband tells his wife that she has to stay in the house, she has to stay in the house. But there's actually a hadith which I'm right now just looking for here, and this hadith actually, here we go. Actually says, I think it's from At-Tirmidhi, and it says that women should not go out in public because when they do, Satan looks at them, and so they should stay inside.
So yes, there's Shia hadiths and Sunni hadiths, which Shia hadiths are very, very explicit.
Yes.
Women should not be learn how to write. Women they shouldn't be given any form of formal education of the sort. So that's the Shia hadith, right? Now the Sunni hadith is the what Klingschor just mentioned. They shouldn't leave the house if Satan looks at them. So that means you should.
Oh, sorry. I made a mistake. The hadith is that a woman should be concealed for when she goes out. The devil look. Now, I don't know if it means that a woman should be concealed and stay inside, or a woman should be concealed and wear a veil, but Yeah,
but the general recommendation is women should stay at home. And now the thing is, you will hear a lot of Sunnis come out and say, like the ignorant ones will come out and say that there's a hadith that says education, every person should get an education, even if you have to go to China. Now, Muhammad had no fucking idea what
no,
is.
that's common misconception. When they say that, what the hadith actually is that you should try and acquire ilm, which they meant religious knowledge. You should try to acquire knowledge in Islam.
But that hadith is fake according to any authentic China, because like Muhammad had no fucking idea what China is. You know who knew what China was? The Indians knew who China was. Nobody else knew who China was at that point.
Well, no, hang on a minute. But what about the Silk Route? There was a Silk Route before Muhammad was born, and people were trading up the north, were trading in silks from China.
But Muhammad didn't know about them, right? Like
I didn't ask him. Why would I assume he didn't know?
No, okay,
he may have been vaguely aware of an Orient, but it wasn't like China was a nation as we think of it. I mean, they were in the middle of one of their dynastic struggles where the country was broken up into smaller kingdoms at the time.
Yeah, Tang. Wasn't the Tang dynasty or something?
But there was a southern dynasty. There were southern dynasties that had broken away, if I'm not...
Right. Okay. The reason I say Muhammad wasn't aware of China is because we had the entire corpus of hadith literature, right? Yeah. We see them mention the Romans, which they mention, the Byzantines they're actually talking about, and we see them talking about the Persians. We hear no mention of China or Sin, as they call it in Arabic, in any of the early literature.
Sin.
Yeah. So I mean. So in Quran, there's nothing there. So if you're in Mecca at that time, remember Mecca wasn't like a whole industrial, like a Muslim hub back in the early days. When Muhammad died, it was still pretty insignificant. Only after the Muslim conquest, after the death of Muhammad, did it become more significant. But there's no mention at all of any other civilization apart from like the Romans and the Iranians at that point.
In answer to Rash's question, I'm sure that people in the Hijaz and the people who travel north had some vague idea of distant lands and so forth. But I mean, his geographic lack of knowledge just goes to show when he postulates that in the Far East there are people who have no protection from the sun and they burn up, and so I'm sure that they were aware that there was this rival trade route to their own. But I mean, the overall specifics of the geography were probably worse than a modern day citizen in the United States, which is saying something. But you got to watch out.
I did see something recently, actually. I did see something recently, actually, where it was claiming that the Romans thought that they controlled most of the earth, and then there were the regions of China that believed that they controlled most of the earth. Yeah. That they coexisted without really knowing each other were there, and that trading was done like in segments between them.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like a kind of Chinese whisper, no pun intended, about each other's existence. So there you go. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, they probably both treated the Silk Road like it was a pneumatic tube. You know what I mean? And you put in the tube, it goes into the wall, and you don't pay. It's gone. It's in the hands of foreigners now, and they're all. But you got to watch out. You can't let your women be educated. I bet you see if there was internet around that area, I'm sure that they would just shut it down. I mean, they'd be like, okay, we'll get rid of porn sites first, and then anything even remotely educational, because you let those goddamn Westerners get a hold of the minds of your young people, especially your girls. They say they're going to teach them addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, but what they're really teaching is ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision. DPR, thank you for joining us. What do you have for us today?
Wait a minute. I've just been informed that DPR has tried to come onto the show now without a mustache. Atheismo has a mustache, Rashman has a mustache, I have a mustache. Where the hell is yours, DPR? Only people with mustaches may come on camera here.
I'm just going to assume that
can I return that comment with this one? It's a pleasure to see you actually live, Klingschor. What a sexy little dishy man you are. Wow.
Oh,
who would have believed it?
Oh, stop.
Anyway.
Blush.
Let's stick on topic. I have to apologise. I have been logged onto the programme, but I had to take a Skype call, so I've missed the majority of the show so far. I've only caught the last couple of moments. So if anything that I touch upon has been discussed before, I apologise. Before I come on to my main points, if I may, can I just comment upon what you were talking about in the last few moments? I think that the shooting of this young girl, I think her name is
Malala.
I think that it actually might turn out to be, and please, before you start giving me grief, a blessing, by which I mean that it has been encouraging to see the amount of people in Pakistan that have come out in protest about this shooting. And she may, as a result of her hideous attack and the injuries she'd suffered, be a symbol, and hopefully a progressive symbol, of moderate Muslims who obviously do not support the extremist views of the Taliban. I don't know whether anyone wants to touch upon that before I go on to my main question, which concerns IERA. And I know that this show has talked about it before. IERA, for those who may not know, the Islamic Education and Research Academy, which has amongst its members Hamza Tzortzis, about which I will not comment. But they have recently published their accounts for the year 2010, and that's the first issue I want to talk about. For an organisation that spreads disinformation and has liars such as Hamza Tzortzis, as it said, I'm just curious, what do you think their income for 2010 was?
A lot.
Sorry, was that... was your answer then...
Qatari or Saudi oil sheikh's piggy bank.
Was your answer then a lot or a lot?
DPR. For a lot is...
Well, I'll put you out of your misery. It was £250,000. £250,000
I
for
would
these people
expect more.
to spread
Is that a lot?
disinformation.
Is that what you would expect?
I would expect more because there are lots of not just the Saudis, right? Even the Turks, the rich Turks, they want to promote Islamic education, and I think it's all fine. So I thought it'd be much higher. I thought it'd be in the millions, maybe 5-6 million. But
I'd be more interested to know what the breakdown is of their receipts. You know, where is the money really coming from? Is it coming from their charity drives, or is it coming from foreign donations?
It doesn't give it. I'm not very good at accounts, but I can tell you I've got their accounts in front of me, and I can post a link to the page if you want to see it. But it basically says income resources from generating funds, voluntary income. That's all it says. 254,483. So $250,000. But as I say, it doesn't say where it comes from. But that wasn't really the main point. What was of interest to me is, and this is a word I'm not familiar with, and I probably will pronounce it wrong. It may be better if I spell it. Shahadas. Shahadas.
Shahadas, yeah.
Right. Which I understand. Am I right that they're the sort of like people that have converted?
See, Shahada is the testimony. So whenever someone converts to Islam, they say the Shahada, which means they say the testimony that they've become. Like they say the testimony that there's no God but one, and Muhammad is the messenger of God.
La ilaha illallah Muhammad
Okay.
Rasulullah.
So here's the next question. From the £250,000 in 2010 that they received, how many shahadats did they get?
How many conversions? That's what they're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many? It says it in the accounts. I can give you the figure. I'm just curious as to what your views are.
Oh, no. Am I being asked how many people
shahada.
were tricked and conned and deluded by Hamza Tzortzis?
I say
Is the answer
15.
one?
I'm going to say something really high. I'm going to say a really high number so that when it's lower, I feel better.
How many?
10
I'm gonna say
million.
100.
It's either really high or really low, or he wouldn't have asked.
Yeah, I'm
So,
saying 15.
Take
That's
either 1 or 10.
100.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 100.
100, and we've got 15. The answer is 60.
okay.
Now, what's interesting to me is that seems to be a pretty shabby return on £250,000 because it works out to be over £4,000 per person.
Each conversion.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a lot better.
Well, everyone
than,
needed a hefty bribe, you know.
It's a lot better than the number of people who have taken the Shahada in Japan. Do you know how many people took the Shahada in Japan over the last 50 years?
2.
What?
No.
0. They can't pronounce. They can't pronounce it. La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. They can't pronounce it. No Japanese person will ever go to heaven.
There actually are some Japanese Muslims.
According to IERA, in the UK, 30 to 40% of new Muslims apostatise within the first year. Anyway,
Yeah.
So how much
That's
does
called the
that work
Salafi
out?
burnout, right?
And would you that 4,166? Would you just put that up, or would you have to pro-rata it of how long they stay?
They don't give it to the actual people who are converting. They probably just use it for proselytizing material. Like they have booklets about how Islam is awesome, and they distribute it in supermarkets. They have booklets about how Muhammad was the nicest person on the planet, and they give it out on the streets and stuff like that. So that's where that money goes. They don't. Unfortunately for them, most people are probably using that as toilet paper or some shit, right? And that's the last thing they want, Muhammad's name being used as toilet paper. But that's what they're doing. Like, why the fuck do you want to give stuff with Muhammad's name on it if 90% of the people will just trash it anyway?
Well, that kind of leads me on, actually, to my second point. I mean, I simply do not believe a word Hamza Tzortzis says. I think he's a professional liar. I'm doubtful about the integrity of their accounts, but I have no proof to justify that. But the second point that I wanted to raise was we had him on the Magic Sandwich show some months ago. I think it was back in March, and it wasn't the best discussion or the best show because he was somewhat outnumbered. But I do recall that the Rationalizer called into that program and did have an exchange with him. And there was an offer during the course of that program for there to be a future debate. And what I'm really wanting to know is that ever going to happen? Have you ever made any attempts to have another debate with him, Rationalizer?
It wasn't actually during that show. It was in advance. Someone mentioned it on Facebook to him and said, would you want to do a recorded Skype call with this guy called the Rationalizer? And he said something like, yeah, that sounds like fun. And I wrote on there and said, that's great, let's arrange it. And yeah, let's do it. And then he went on the Magic Sandwich show and I called in. I kind of had a suspicion that he was going to change his mind. So I called into the Magic Sandwich show because I thought, after he's been on this, he's not going to want to talk to anyone again. So I called in on the Magic Sandwich show, and shortly after that, he then decided he didn't want to do it. But, however, since then, he said that Skype wasn't conducive for talking to people. But since then, he sent me an email. Since then, he sent me an email, and he asked me, IERA are doing some market research, and they want answers from atheists on certain questions. And he asked, could he call me on Skype and do a video interview with me, asking me questions about why I don't believe Islam is true and things like this. And we went through that, and we were friendly with each other, had a little bit of a laugh and a giggle, and it was a nice experience. And then he sent me an email afterwards. Now, I didn't mention the debate at all, but he sent me an email shortly after that, the same day, saying, thanks for your time, that was pretty enjoyable, maybe we should do this Skype chat after all. So then I was like, oh good, he's gone back to that, we're going to do it. But I've actually emailed him a few times and said, do you ever fancy this? But whenever he replies, he always misses out the shall we have the call and comments on everything else that I wrote. I think it would be great.
I'm just wondering, do you think he's afraid? Because I suspect that he's an arrogant little shit who thinks that he can, with his wonderful words and eloquency and whatever, run the gish gallop on people. But he probably has looked at you and thought, shit, I'm not going to get away with it with him on a one-on-one discussion. Do you think he's frightened?
Well, no, I think that what it is you look at people like William Lane Craig, he does seem to base himself a lot on William Lane Craig. He uses his arguments, he uses his debate style, the way that the debates are always formally structured, always give him option A or option B to escape a difficult time, and so on. So that's the way he seems to like to debate. The problem with talking to someone one-on-one is they can say, hang on a minute, are you sure? Can you prove that? and then they can't make false assertions and base an entire argument on it because they can't get past the first false assertion. And that is what I think is the problem. I mean, I would love to have this chat with Hamza. He's currently doing some kind of a UK tour, and one of them is something like the universe and the Quran were both made perfectly from Allah, or something like this. And he's going around and he's giving lectures on this, but he won't do the Skype recorded debate that we originally agreed on this very subject. So he's willing to go around telling people he's right, but he's not willing to discuss with people if he's right.
How do you think it's best to get him involved? I mean, if he comes to a city near me, I will go and see him and invite him to have this discussion with you. But what else do you think we can do to encourage this to happen? Because I think it would be very interesting.
Well, the thing is, DPR, as an attorney, I can hope you appreciate this analogy. There are sometimes, I don't think it's a matter of, I mean, I'm sure that Rationalizer and other critics of Islam who have kept up their material and are quick on their feet, I'm sure that they would be capable if such a debate were to ever happen. But I don't think that we should ascribe it to a lack of confidence on Hamza's part as far as his own ability to debate, or necessarily being intimidated by Rationalizer or any other particular debate. The problem is that no. I mean, Hamza, we love to rip on that guy, but he is not without talent as a speaker. And the problem is that, and I said, as an attorney, you can appreciate this, that sometimes a case comes before you that you just don't want to go to trial. You need to settle out of court, no matter how skilled you think you are, unless you're Johnny Cochran or something like that. You don't want it to go to trial. You don't stand a chance of a hands down victory. You can only hope to get an out of court settlement. And I think that the problem is that if you have an advocate for Islam who debates anyone, even if you go up against someone who's a terrible debater but who has at least some knowledge of the material, then it's impossible to pull your old bag of tricks. It would be like a stage magician saying, okay, it would be like a stage magician in the same room as James Randi, and James Randi would just say, here, let me tell you how he did that. Let me tell you what the trick was with that. So you don't need to be, again, you don't need any degree of skill. I mean, when we brought him on to the Magic Sandwich Show, he was trusting that you and Aaron would be completely ignorant of Islamic lore, and maybe he was right about that. So you just brought me in as a ringer, and I'll be the first to say I'm no expert. I'm just barely qualified enough to know when someone's lying to me on this material.
You didn't need to be with him, and
yeah.
I have to say, I think you whipped his ass. But I'm sorry, I do think it's a matter of cowardice. He is perfectly prepared to go around doing his lecture tour, and no doubt puts provisos on it in the same way as William Lane Craig does. And I challenge anyone to find a debate that William Lane Craig has entered into on YouTube where he does not go first, and secondly, where he does not open his second argument with, I said in my opening arguments, blah, 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 and my opponent has not addressed these arguments. He controls that environment, and in the same way, Hamza Tzortzis is trying to do the same. That is why I'm calling him a coward for not having a one-to-one debate with the Rationalizer.
I do remember Hamza doing the exact same thing, and he stood up and said he didn't address a single one of my arguments, and his opponent said, I'm not supposed to address his arguments at this point. I'm supposed to give my opening arguments, and then we address each other's arguments next. He knows that very well. And this is the exact kind of trickery that William Lane Craig does that Hamza copies. He either the person goes after him and they make their opening arguments, and then Hamza says, he didn't refute anything I said. But if they stand up and refute what he said, he'll stand there and say, he didn't bring any of his own arguments. So he's got a plan A or a plan B, which is what William Lane Craig does. It's not a debate, it's a show. Hamza's got a show, just one show when it comes to debates. And the problem is, if you can get him off that format and you know the tricks of the show, the argument is so utterly crap, it is really, really easy to point to all of the flaws in the logical reasoning of it. And I've said to him, what I said to him originally was, your argument is full of holes, I know what they are and I'd love to discuss them with you, and he won't do it. He won't do it at all.
Exactly. I totally agree with you, and that's why I'm calling him a coward. And his cowardly tactics also spread to ambushing tactics, as he did with PC Myers outside the hotel in Dublin 18 months ago. I'm sorry, I have no respect for him. I am calling him a coward, and I am challenging him to have a debate with the Rationalizer on Skype.
It seems that the people that he debates, they're not out to just say your argument's a load of rubbish. It seems that, like, you know, it was it Hans Larsson or someone he debated, and I was in email chats with this Hans Larsson guy. He said to me, I know about Islam, but you know, I'm not really going to present any arguments as such. The only thing I think is important is that we have a public discussion, because it's good to have Muslims and non-Muslims talking to each other in public. He wasn't there to point out all of Hamza's errors. He was there so that Muslims will think, oh, atheists are nice. This is the kind of people that Hamza's agreeing to debate with, and then avoiding debating with someone who wants to say, oh, you know, I'll get on with you fine, I'll be nice to you, but I won't be nice and pretend your argument is a load of rubbish, because it is.
And he's been paid handsomely for this, because looking again at the accounts, I presume where it says staff costs, it's talking about payments to people like him. In total, £96,000. So he's being paid to go around having debates that he controls in a forum that he dictates, spreading lies and disinformation, and all of this under the umbrella of being a charitable organisation.
I'll tell you what. You know what I'll do? I'm gonna go on the web now, find a petition site. I'm going to start a petition. Hamza should have a recorded Skype debate with the Rationalizer on the very subject, the universe and Quran, perfect creations of Allah, ? And then if you want to see it, then go and sign the petition. I'll cut out this bit of the show and make it as a separate video, so people can like mirror that little bit if they want to encourage other people to put it up and so on. And go and sign the petition. And if more than like 4 people are interested in signing it, maybe if there's a sufficient number of people, then Hamza will see it, and he won't publicly be able to dismiss it, saying nobody's interested. If there's a lot of people that are signing it, then he'll have to admit that people are interested in seeing it, and hopefully then he'll agree to actually participate in it.
Well, I'd be happy if you do such a video. I'd be happy to mirror it on my site and also the Magic Sandwich site, subject to approval from the others involved in that. Let's bring it on. I suspect he will not do it, and we all know why he will not do it.
Well, at least if he's not going to do
it.
At least if he's not going to do it, he's going to have to not do it very publicly. He's not going to do it. Not do it very quietly, swept under the carpet. He'll not do it very openly and very, very publicly. I just outright would challenge him. I outright do challenge him to take part in this. And if people aren't interested, that's fair enough. But if people are interested, then I challenge him to come and accept my offer. We'll record it and we'll put it up completely unedited and let people decide what they want to decide after viewing it.
I have a feeling that what will happen is if he does see this invitation, you will go through months of debates with him or discussions with him about exactly who's going to moderate it, what format it will take, and so on and so forth. That's my prediction. He might not publicly ignore it, but he will do that.
I think that's what he'll do as well. But there's an example on my channel where I bumped into some Muslim proselytizers in a city centre. They tried to convert me to Islam. I explained to them why I wasn't convinced by their miracles. And then what I did is I kept their email and I invited them to have a chat with me on Skype, and we recorded it. They told me stuff. I told them why I thought it was wrong. We just had a nice chat. We all giggled. You know, it was really civilised. It was great fun. I really enjoyed it. Nobody was nasty to each other, and they understood why I didn't believe any of it, and I must confess I didn't understand why they did believe in it by the end of it, but it was an enjoyable time. It didn't need any moderation because we were just a few guys sitting around chatting, and that's all it needs to be. Just sit around and have a chat.
I think the problem with Hamza is that he doesn't appreciate when he's being incredibly insulting and rude. There was the discussion that he had with a professor in Pakistan, whose name I forget, but towards the end of that, having made several sort of like statements which were incredibly insulting, he ends up by offending the professor in such a profound way that he got up and left. And Hamza had the audacity to say that he hadn't been insulting and then demand the professor return because Hamza, this is Hamza speaking, I am your guest. I think that, I'm sorry to say it, I think that Hamza is just so ignorant that he has no idea whether what he is saying is true or not, or whether it is insulting or not. I'm sorry to say it. I've got no respect for him. These are my views, not the views of this show. I know.
I was joking with Captain Disguise a while ago. I said, you know so much about this stuff. You do realize that there's more money in apologism than there is in criticizing. And he says, yeah, maybe he says, I know this and that. Maybe I should become an apologist. I could be rich. And I said, there's just one thing you're missing. He says, what's that? White skin. And he just laughed. And I said, it's just the thing with the apologists. I mean, you said Hamza seems ignorant. I mean, these organizations that are trying to market Islam, not just in the West, but even in some some sort of Orthodox traditional communities in Africa and Asia, if they're looking at two resumes and they think, okay, well, this guy was he was born in Lebanon, he's from a good background, he's memorized the Quran and can repeat it by heart, he knows all this stuff, oh, that's good. But this guy, he's from Liverpool and he converted last week. Alhamdulillah, we found our guy. There's kind of an inferiority complex there where someone who is, because compared to some of the people, the actual scholars, some people, I saw some people in the chat scoffing at the idea of religious scholars because they study things we consider imaginary. But let's face it, there are some people who study this material their entire lives, know it front to back, and obviously Hamza doesn't have that kind of a knowledge base. You know what I mean? He's sorely underqualified to just argue law.
I want to pick you up on that point, if I may. If I can, very briefly, and I know I'm seeking to monopolise, and I apologise, but very briefly, I have to come back to you on that one, Almighty. When he was on the Magic Sandwich Show, we talked about Sharia law, and what he didn't seem to be able to accept is that there are different interpretations of Sharia law. Yeah. And as a result, some Sharia courts will quite happily pass death penalties for various offences, including apostasy, for which I think it was apostasy. He actually seemed to suggest that beheading was acceptable because it was painless. I mean, this is how fucking distorted he is. And one of the things I would like, if you do get him on Rationalizer, one of the things I would like you to address, if it's appropriate, is whether he supports the Taliban's approach to Sharia law and its interpretation, and whether it's justified to stop a school bus, get on with a gun and shoot a 15-year-old person in the head, and whether he thinks that that is an acceptable interpretation of Sharia law.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Klingschor, go for it.
Thank goodness. I thought,
we can hear you. He's just ignoring you.
Yes. So I wondered if that was the case. I just wanted to say that I've just been trying to say this the whole time. Now maybe it'll be stale, but Abdurrahman Green.
Yes.
Have you seen the talk where he refers to Hamza as the Muslim Aristotle?
Oh my goodness.
Because he's so wise, not just because he's Greek, ha ha ha, audience laugh, but because he's so wise in philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I wasn't trying to knock Hamza earlier. I'm just saying that this religion has produced a lot of literature, so that if you Kling told us a brief anecdote before we even got on about how there was a Muslim student at his school, and he was talking about Al-Ghazali and how key he was, and she says, well, I'm from such and such a tradition, and we think Ghazali is crap, ergo he's crap. So there's a lot of that where, specific schools just don't pay attention to each other's tradition, even though it helps. Like Photon was saying earlier that, there was this very questionable, you said you weren't here, DBR. They said there's this very questionable hadith about stoning and how it was in the Quran is gone, and it was also in the Shia tradition. So when you have the Shia tradition, even though they sort of broke off and sort of reviled anyone from the Sunnah side of that divide, the fact that they both have it lends much stronger credence to it being part of the original doctrine that the Prophet and his companions. So, if you look at all these different schools and study them open-mindedly, there's just a lot of material there to cover if you're sort of a sincere, looking at it with an Orientalist or an archaeologist point of view. There's a lot of material to cover, and like I said, I'm not just trying to take a cheap shot at Hamza when I say he's underqualified compared to the other people he could have. But there's so many sort of native Arab scholars or subcontinental scholars or North African scholars who they're just walking encyclopedias of Islamic knowledge, but none of them are being tapped for this job. Instead they're going for someone who has salesmanship skills. Hamza
is like, I'm not even going to say that he's a first year, because his level of research is actually below that. He's like a high school kid. His level of research is so poor in all the essays that he writes. His logic, the way he the straw men that he resorts to, and the selective evidence that he picks to put together his arguments. It's really sad. He's not even at university level. It's remarkable. So he's definitely underqualified. But that's the problem. See, for example, I people sometimes take issue with me and say, "Oh, why do you make yourself look like a scholar?" I don't. And that's the problem. Hamza he's as Stop Stoning says, he's a professional Muslim. He's making himself seem like he is an authority and that he has, you should listen to him. Whereas in actual fact, he's got absolutely no credibility.
See, my goal really is I'm not going to sit there and what I'm interested in, right, is he's got this argument. As he says it, I see loads of holes in it. And what I want him to do is fill in those holes, remove the logical contradictions, and make it so that it makes sense. Because that's essentially what my job is. I take complex processes from industry experts, they explain them to me in great detail, I make sense of them, and then what I do is I rationalise them into a more simple form so that other workers can understand what they need to do. And basically what my job is taking complex things and making all these disparate facts fit together and not contradict each other. So when I hear this Kalam argument, it was from back with William Lane Craig, and I'd hear it and it just had so many holes. If it was something he was trying to get me to rationalise for other people, I'd be saying, hang on a minute, what do you mean by that? Can you explain how this and that can coexist as being true, and so on and so on? And that's literally all I want to do. I just want him to sit there and let me ask him the questions so that he can make his hypothesis as solid as he possibly can, so that I agree that it's logically consistent, and I don't think that it's possible.
I don't think it is, and I think that the tactic he will use, as he normally does, is to fill his speech with a load of words that mean nothing. If you listen to what he says and remove from any speech he has made the words first and foremost, which it seems to be one of his great ones, that first and foremost, I'm going to say, remove logical fallacy and any other form of fallacy that he always refers to. Remove his philosophical terms such as epistemology and ontology. I can't even say it, but you know what I mean. If you remove all of that and look at the bare bones of what he's got to say, there is absolutely nothing there that cannot easily be disproved. And I'm sorry, I have to go back to it. I think that he is knowingly dishonest in the same way as the likes of William Lane Craig and Ray Comfort are, and he should be called on that.
Yeah, well, the real question I think boils down to is he dishonest in a completely outright criminal fashion, or is it more like that? To quote, I'm sorry, Sean. I brought in Sean. He's able to join us now. What the question is that guy? What was it? Martin Luther, who said he did in a letter. He said, I didn't see the problem with telling a few good, strong lies in defense of the faith. So, I mean, there are some people who, and it seems there's a lot of them, they're willing to engage in deceptions, individual deceptions, because they think that what they're defending overall is the supreme truth. Okay, so, Sean, thank you for joining us. We've already touched on...
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. We've already touched on your story in brief, but why don't you take it from the top and explain Pineapple Gate to us?
Okay, right. Well, at the beginning of every year at the university, we have a freshers' fair where you have, obviously, every student society gather in this big area, and everyone will go and join the societies they want to. So, pretty simple premise. We decide when we arrive at about 10 o'clock, an hour early, as we're obviously one of the people behind the store and just front. So, yeah, we're getting ready. Tim, well, there's people on the committee, myself, the secretary, the treasurer, and the vice president. And the treasurer decides, and the vice president, wouldn't it be a sort of a great idea if we got a pineapple and labelled it Mohammed? I was obviously initially taken aback by how surreal the situation was. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. We can make a good political statement out of this. So we put it on the table. The freshers' fair goes from about 11 to 4 or 5 o'clock. At about 2:30, we got received our first sort of, harsh encounter with the Rusu's society administrator sort of assistant. The main guy who's the deals with everything, Adam Bailey, and then Adam and then Emily deals with she's essentially his assistant. She comes down to the freshers' fair and tells us that we're receiving a lot of complaints. And I say, okay, fair enough, and I'm obviously sorry to hear that, but could you maybe put these people towards us? Because I think, in this informal context, very least we're entitled to is to face our accuser. Okay, well, and I explained to her why we're doing it as well, and that was a political statement about the sort of sacred nature of free speech and all these things, and how they should not be curtailed in the name of simple offence. So she takes my arguments and my complaints back to Adam. He then decides that he wants to come down himself about half an hour later, so about 3 o'clock. I happen to be elsewhere at the time, and I get a call from Adam telling me, oh, they've just tried to kidnap the pineapple. And yeah, they grabbed, I'm not joking.
No, they didn't kidnap, they tried to steal the pineapple. Come on, you only named it after a person. You hadn't elevated it to human.
Yeah, that's why I started calling it kidnapping. But no, it's...
Kidnapping has a nicer ring to it.
Adam runs off with it. Tim decides he's going to save the pineapple. I believe the correct way he phrased it was, I liberated the pineapple. And he took the pineapple, put it under the store, and I returned. I'm saying, no, I'm not going to run and hide over this. So I say, I try to be as non-cheesy as possible at this point. I grab the pineapple and shout, for freedom, and then put it back on the table. And then about 3:30, Adam comes down for a third time and says, oh, this is, 3 strikes and you're out sort of thing. And he asks us to leave. And, we obviously argued about it. Yeah.
Come on, carry on. I was just labelling my pineapple, Sean. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean you any offence.
Taste your own medicine.
Taken. To be honest, I'm flattered. But no, about 3:30 he comes down. We sort of, explain our arguments, why it's so important. We sort of have this mob of people as well, predominantly sort of from the Muslim society, as far as I could tell. And some of them were actually getting quite aggressive. One person tried to start shouting at us. One person tried to take the label off the pineapple forcefully and then run off with it. And then the treasurer started writing on the labels and the back of the business cards we've been using. He just kept putting new ones on. after, of course, at the second time, we'd crossed out Muhammad with a single line for Jesus, but that didn't really placate anyone. But so, yeah, and then we were standing there, we realised that this wasn't really going anywhere. And I said, the treasurer turned to me and said, we have a choice, either we can lead the Freshers' Fair or organise an Occupy Freshers' Fair, which I thought, again, it's not going to achieve anything. And we're not hardly going to get any recruits if they have to sort of fight their way through as an angry mob. So, yeah, I decided we have to leave. It's only maybe an hour before everyone else has to leave anyway. And we'd got a lot of signatures. And we thought that by kicking us out, they'd proven our point that you still don't have true freedom of speech or expression when it comes to offending the sensibilities of the more religious types.
Yeah.
So,
Could I ask a question, if I may, very quickly? As a result of this, have you been subjected to any sort of like harassment or any repercussions?
I've been subjected to strong argument, but that's about it, to be honest. Which I'm obviously grateful for, because stimulated debate is nothing I'm never going to complain about. But no, so far I've been quite fortunate in that I've had no one come up to me and sort of say, "Oh, I think you're evil," whatever. In fact, I'll be completely honest with you. I've gone out a few times since then, and I've had people, complete strangers, come up to me in nightclubs who have just gone to the university and not even sure if all of them did, and they were just going, "Oh, mate, I heard about you, you're a fucking hero," and then all this stuff, and getting me drinks, and that's probably the more standard reaction at this point. But I think that shows the difference between maybe Britain and, for instance, America. Like, if you've done something like
I was about to make a tongue-in-cheek comment about, you did what you did, you insulted religion in public, and you did it. England sounds lovely, because you would catch hell for it in some parts of the U.S., certainly.
No, yeah, it's... Like I said, it wasn't people... The main criticism, people, like I said, the majority of the criticism was intelligent, which is, like I said, I'm thankful for. But Besma, for instance, is a girl I know we're talking about. She's a student there, and we were talking, and she was saying, she comes from Algeria originally, which is a very intelligent sort of law student, and she was saying, oh, it was to offend and stuff like this, and I said, no, it happens to be the case that at this time in history, Muslims, perhaps arguably more than any of the other major theistic religious groups, will try and enforce their view of society on everyone else. And my belief, as always, I've been always very much a strong believer in liberty, in that if your actions, if your ability to make choices and your choices don't prevent other people from making their own choices, you have total freedom. Unless your choices literally prevent other people from making their own choices, you have every right to do what you like. Essentially, all authority has to be justified. All the exercise of authority always has to be justified, morally. So
I just wonder what the insult is with the pineapple. How can a pineapple be an insult? It's like when I was at school, the other kids, they'd come up and, to upset you and get you into a fight, they'd always say something about your mum. And no one ever come up to me and say, your mum's a pineapple. And then I was, really angry and beat them up or something. That never happened, Say, associating someone with a pineapple, I really don't see what the insult is at all. Nobody's been able to explain to me what is insulting about a pineapple. I mean, there was the incident with the school teacher where the children voted to call the new class teddy bear Mohammed, and then she was in trouble for that. But there were probably other children in the class named Mohammed. Now, what if one of those kids was hairy like a teddy bear and had a head a bit like the shape of a pineapple? Would the parents, is that blasphemous because they called an ugly kid Mohammed? Because, pineapples are lovely.
Yes, I can understand. Like I said, I was saying this to people in that if you are a Muslim, this is part of the point. If you are Muslim and someone calls a pineapple Mohammed, in the sense that whether it's explicit or implicit, they're intending it to be a portrayal of their prophet, right? I can understand for a Muslim that this might be offensive from some sort of abstract theological perspective, but we aren't all Muslims. If their moral code forbids things like this, their moral code doesn't apply to us because we reject its foundation. Like, we reject the fundamental premise, like the justification there for their moral system, like their religion, the fact that Allah exists and all this stuff. We reject the underlying foundation. Then we don't follow for any of the...
Well, sure, it's not quite so much that, if I can ask this question, if I may, what is your response to their view, which I think is more on point, is that they have a right not to be offended. That really is the issue, isn't it?
Well, Yeah, well, they have a right not to offend. They have a right to offend. They have a right to be offended. And they have a right to offend and not offend. They have a right to be offended and not offended. Like, we have all these things. We can do all these things, but the important thing to remember is that it's a secondary right. Or at least liberty, freedom, life, equality, and, happiness. These are what you call, we're defending Enlightenment values. And these are what you'd call sort of foundational rights. Things like offense can't be used as a justification for curtailing these foundational rights. Like that, we were defending Enlightenment values, the foundation. I mean, I'm not one of these people with these sort of postmodernist cultural relativists who think everyone's equal. Like, the measure of a superior civilization is how well it treats other civilizations. Like, I'm not a multiculturalist or I'm an interculturalist. I think all cultures have to be able to coexist peacefully under this sort of Enlightenment paradigm in which we can each live in that live. I can be offended by what you do, but I accept that you have a different worldview. And as long as my ability to make choices doesn't affect your ability to make choices, we should all be able to just get along. It's better to live in peace and to die in war. Like, that's so this idea of tolerance and coexistence, which comes from these Enlightenment values. This is what I was defending. I wasn't targeting any religious group. I was showing that at this time in history, at least, that group is threatening sort of the Enlightenment principles which Western civilization is built on. Like, it's not about West being better. It's about we happen to have had these brilliant philosophers who gave us this liberal democracy that we live in.
Well, I wonder what would happen if you had like a tiered system, and if you had someone from the art department who was really good with oil painting make a really flattering. Okay, also, could you mute your mic when you're not speaking, because I'm getting a bit of an echo, Sean.
Sorry, what's that?
I said I'm getting a bit of an echo from you when you're not speaking. Could you silence your mic? Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
There's no problem. Anyway, I was wondering if you had like 3 booths, and like the middle one just had a kind of a admittedly silly. So I'm not going to say that they're without any room to view it as an insult, whether they get offended or not. I can see how they could view it as insulting because it's silly in a kind of Alice in Wonderland way. But if you had just the pineapple with Muhammad written there and no particular follow up or punchline, and then you'd had someone else just paint a portrait of Muhammad, strictly speaking, not permitted by many schools, and it just said Muhammad at the bottom. But other than that, it looked like something that Da Vinci could have painted. It was just very, state-like and well done, without any kind of comedy or slapstick. And then on the other end, you could have something more offensive, like have a pineapple with Muhammad, and then have an unripe peach next to it with Aisha written on it. And then I wonder how, would even the oil painting give offense? You know what I mean? It's because there was a guy recently. He took out an ad because all these different atheist ads had been taken down by bus and sign companies for being too inflammatory in the U.S. And this guy he literally did this as a test. He bought an ad and it just said atheists and gave a website, and that was taken down for being too controversial. So. It's really, and that was in probably a mostly Christian community in the States. So it's amazing how little it takes, or even when there's just 2 different categories of blasphemy: deliberate and not. I mean, there are many things that you just say very matter of fact, and they say, well, that is blasphemy by virtue of the fact that my religion condemns it. And then there are those things like, because what you did was to test the waters. So they can claim that there was intent. But, whereas with the other guy just saying, writing a billboard that just said atheists, that was deliberately designed not to offend. It was just putting forward something that incidentally went against somebody else's rules. So I think there's a gray area for them to say that there was the intent, but I mean legally, I don't see how they had any case to ask you to leave.
Actually, this is what happened. RUSU, the Reading University Students' Union, said that we had broken their behavioural policy, and this is their document that sort of all societies have to agree to. So we said, okay, right. So we said fundamentally we have a right to philosophical right to do this, it's about defending Enlightenment values and everything else. But then, after that, they threw their behavioural policy at us. So our rebuttal, the treasurer actually was the one who came up, the vice president, who was sort of very meticulous in this way, found I think it was a 1986 Education Act, which meant that in Britain, it stated that university campuses had a duty to uphold things like freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Like this, the government gave them this mandate. So yeah, that was our rebuttal, and essentially that's why I'm thinking maybe they realised this. Maybe, I mean, they had daily crisis meetings for a week after the Freshers' Fair. I mean, that just gives you an idea of how disturbed they were. But maybe they realised that it's fundamentally there's nothing really they can do. There's no disciplinary action they can take against us that would end well for them. So they've thought maybe the best thing to do is placate us. I mean, I got a call on the morning of my first social. I mean, after the Freshers' Fair, well, like immediately afterwards, our Facebook page had the normal amount of views of, let's say maybe, I don't know, 100 views a day or something. Sorry, 100 views a week or something like that. But that went from, in just a matter of 3 days, from that to like something silly like 3,000. And it was because on the day after, someone posted on our Facebook page, oh, look, you're on the Daily Mail. And apparently Student Rights had reported on it first, sort of the human rights blogging, UK blogging group. And then after them, the Huffington Post and the Daily Mail. And the day after that, the Times of India. Like, we had to sit down with Rusu's lawyers, and we literally sat down on the table with them, and he just threw on the table and said, oh, look, you're in the Spectator, and you're in the Times of India, which, give you a little context, I mean, in a matter of 2 days, it hit the largest newspaper in the second largest country in the world, in a large democracy, which is also apparently the most circulated newspaper in the world, written in English, which is, of course, the most spoken language as a second language. So, like, blowing way out of proportion. Like, I had people sending me from Paraguay and to Pakistan, sort of messages going, oh, like, love and support from Pakistani atheists or whatever. Like, this, it was very uplifting, obviously, but it meant that people had showed themselves to be on our side. I mean, my personal tutor, my philosophy course, I had my brother's friend interviewed because he wanted to do philosophy at my university next year. And the professor who was my personal tutor told him, I don't know how it came up, but he told the professor that he knew me, and the professor was like, oh, sort of the pineapple guy or whatever, and he said, tell him, like, I'm massively in favour, and apparently he'd already sent an email to all the academia on campus, to the professors and such, saying, oh, I'm offering my services to be the legal representation of the pineapple and stuff like this, like, So
do you fear that you're going to be labelled for the rest of your life as Pineapple Man?
But I'll be honest with you, it's only given me good things. Like, I probably shouldn't be saying this in a YouTube show, but, it might damage my credibility. But I was out one night, and to give you an idea, like, how extreme it went the other way, instead of all this hate, I was out and this girl was absolutely sarcastic to me, said, if you make another Muslim girl cry, I'm going to spank you. That is a sort of reaction I got from people. That. And she was really good looking, right? I was like, don't know you from Adam, but I appreciate the support, essentially, is the only thing. Like, with no negativity as a result of this. Most of the people who say sort of the pineapple guys say it sort of tongue-in-cheek, like, oh, like, how ridiculously blown out proportion is this sort of thing. Like, everyone sees it surreal like we do. They see it as being surreal like we do. So that's part of the shock of it, I suppose. Something which, like you say, the Rationalizer, is that it's so, it was so minor to begin with. It's labelling a pineapple, Muhammad, in this one store, in this insignificant store, in this insignificant Freshers' Fair. And it hits, like, the international news and sort of characterised in comparison with sort of the recent Muslim protests and everything else, like, global affairs and all this rubbish. So that's, blown completely out of proportion, so no.
Are you seriously saying that one of the most notable positive consequences of your actions were that you got to talk to a girl for a few seconds who nearly might have probably become your girlfriend in the future?
No.
Rock star with groupies now, aren't you?
I'm telling university, I mean, plenty of people. But that wasn't the thing which was curious about it. It was how random it was. Like I said, it's surreal. Like, how many times do you think in the history of mankind you've heard, for example, the sentence, either the pineapple goes or you do? Like, that's, like I said, that's it's the same with this. Like, how many times do you think a girl would be intrigued by you because of the fact that they were a pineapple? Like, that's, you know what I mean? It's the
Try
whole
that one
thing
time.
strange. Like, that's the whole point. Like, that's, so yeah, but I was saying, it's strange, but good things come out of it in some convoluted way. But no, but obviously tons of conversation. And yeah, I'll say as a whole, part of the reason why Rusi can't take this disciplinary action against us is that as a whole, I think it's actually boosted sort of the credibility of our group and it's shown that we are sort of uncompromising in a good way and that we will stand for our principles in the face of sort of pointless bureaucracy. Like this, that's just the sum of it.
Is if you'd originally labelled that pineapple Moses, then none of this would have happened. Could be Moses, Solomon, could have been Jesus, and it could have been one of many people. But just because you named it Muhammad, it was linked directly with the Islamic faith. Even though Moses and Jesus are all revered prophets of Islam, and you're not allowed to worship any of them. I mean, the whole idea of you can't depict Muhammad is so that you don't worship Muhammad instead of the messenger. Worship the message, not the messenger, basically, or the sender of the message. But, you know, these people are you know, they're all supposedly got the same career, being a messenger from Allah. And they're all revered and respected, and you have to say magic words after every time you say their name. But if you'd written Moses on it, I really strongly suspect that these people wouldn't have come in and said, "Oh, I'm really offended because Moses was one of our prophets and you can't depict him as a pineapple." Or if you come in and said Jesus, they probably wouldn't have complained and said, "Jesus is a revered prophet, you can't do that." Maybe a Christian would have complained about Jesus because Jesus is the brand name for Christianity. But I think that the Muslims in this case probably reacted because Mohammed is the brand name, the trademark of Islam. Yeah. So it wasn't the fact that a pineapple in itself is at all offensive, or even labelling it Muhammad. And even if you'd written Prophet Muhammad, just naming a pineapple after the name of a popular person from the past who happened to be a prophet isn't the insult. The insult is you specifically targeted a religion, and it's not the feelings of the individual that were under attack, it was the credibility of their belief. And the more people single out an individual religion, the more it feels threatened. And I think that these people were just literally feeling that they personally were being attacked because the thing that they believe to be true is being attacked. And even though it's such a really, really pathetic attack, I mean, if an omnipotent being wanted to save humanity from hellfire and couldn't stand up to a student's pineapple, then, you know, he needs to do a bit of work on his omnipotence, I think.
Actually, an interesting thing that you want to test out, right? Like, yes, you said if the name was Moses or Jesus, there wouldn't have been much of a reaction. That's true. Now, here's an interesting thing you might want to try out next time, Sean, if there's a next time. Like, instead of going Muhammad, like, you know, Muslims don't refer to Jesus with the name Jesus. They call him Isa or Isa bin Maryam. So if you actually like, you can try this out someday. Like, you just put have a watermelon and name him Jesus, and then the next day try the same thing with a watermelon and name him Isa bin Maryam. And then you will see the people. Like, I lived in, I still am in quite a bit of a Muslim community, so. The sentiment within this Muslim community is that no, Jesus isn't really the prophet that we're talking about. They have a false conception of who Isa bin Maryam is. So you actually just changing the name from the anglicized version to the Arabic version. You call him Isa bin Maryam, or you call him Musa bin Imran, right? Like, that's the name of Moses in Arabic. You call him Musa. And you write it using the Arabic version of the name, and then you'll see Muslims get offended again. Not as much as Muhammad. It's still going to be 1/10 of the offense that people get offended with Muhammad. But you should maybe take try a social experiment on this someday.
Yeah, that'd be quite interesting. Do it differently on different tables. Yeah. That pretend to have no allegiance with each other, and on the one side you've got them put in. Isa bin Maryam, and on another one, Jesus, son of Mary. and then just see what happens and see if you only get complaints about the Isa ibn Maryam. That's quite an interesting experiment, actually.
I agree. You got to maintain your control as strictly as possible.
We're already considering this next year. I mean, well, not just next year. Well, a lot of people have been considering this because it was just a natural consequence. Just having loads of different fruit and then labeling each a different religious figure and see what happens, like having a fruit banquet and then maybe later on just so let people tuck in like which religious figure do you want to eat first and all this. And like that's, it's equally surreal, but again, I suppose to prove a point that no matter how ridiculous the whole thing is or from some sort of weird perspective, how offensive you might find it, it's still, because essentially, I think one of the criticisms, again, one of the more intelligent criticisms leveled against us was, you picked the wrong venue. Like, it's a social thing, it's a freshers' fair to welcome new students, you have to feel welcome. I said, but what's the purpose of a political statement if no one's going to hear it? You know what I mean? That's good. If no one's going to hear what you're saying, then why would it? So, again, like, if the point has been made the first time, then there's no harm in it again, essentially, is what I was getting at. That's...
I'm interested to know what you're going to name the prize-winning marrow. Sorry, Klingschor.
But I find it interesting that people, like, the fact that that Muslims are offended, like anyone in any situation, but that Muslims are offended by you having a pineapple of Muhammad. Well, do you know what I find offensive? I find offensive that this book implicitly allows child marriage, or that it describes homosexuality as an unnatural abomination, or that it says that adulterers should be... or that it says that menstruation is a filthy disease. Like, these are things that I find quite offensive. And they conflict with my ethics, just as drawing Muhammad might conflict with the Muslims' ethics. And I think that this is more offensive. Allowing child marriage is a lot more offensive than, you drew a nasty picture of someone. So, does that mean that we get to ban all the Qurans now? Is that...
Things I would want to. Like, but we're better. I mean,
exactly.
We wouldn't contemplate doing that. It's, that's part of my ethics, is allowing people with different views to live their life. I mean, whilst they would sit there and moan about it, I'd see something, consider it mildly offensive, and I'd be like, okay, move the fuck on with my life. Like, I have more important things to do. Like this, I see it as fundamentally infantile, or the way they behave. Like, that's, you can either be a man about it, or go home and cry. Like, it's just, I don't see why they can't just move on. It's not that important. Like, everyone on this panel has probably stated already, it's, in the grand scale of things, it's so insignificant. Yet they always have to be way out of proportion, because, again, like you were touching on before, their whole belief system isn't evidentialist. Like, you have fideism and evidentialism, like you believe in faith or through evidence, like reason, empirical observation, all these things. And if you don't think that evidence is a prerequisite for the truth value of your beliefs, like, for the truthfulness of your beliefs, if you, just for the fact you want something to be true is enough to make it true, then your belief, this faith, not in the sense that you trust someone, faith is in the funny epistemological sense, then it's fundamentally unstable. Like, your belief is so fragile that might be why you get this exaggerated response. But as soon as you point this minute flaw in someone's belief, because they realise that this minute flaw isn't just some sort of misinterpretation or sort of a rare exception. It's more like this tiny crack in the mess that is, that is the cracked windscreen that is their ideology. That they don't like it to be pointed out. Like, that's because it's so fundamentally unfounded. I've probably used the word fundamentally far too many times, but you get my point. Like, it's so just unjust, so disconnected from reality that as soon as you begin to criticize it, you probably get really, really sensitive. That's at least my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, the Quran is pretty harsh on people that don't believe. If you look at chapter 25, verses 43 to 44, have you seen the one who takes as his God his own desire? Then would you be responsible for him? Or do you think that most of them hear or reason? They are not except livestock. Rather, they are even more astray in their way. So if I don't submit myself to this hypothesis of one God and the rules of Islam, or the rule of Islam, then I'm worse than an animal. I'm more astray than livestock.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really and to say that anyone deserves to be thrown into fire for eternity, even for 10 seconds in a fire, is utterly disgusting. To say that someone deserves an eternal punishment in fire, how lowly must you think of people that don't think the same as you, if you think that is fair? The problem with religious books that have got things like hell in them and stuff, it's always an us and them. It's a separation of people who are in the club and people who aren't in the club. And the people who aren't in the club are usually to be pitied or despised. And, if you put that in scale of a pineapple, then I think you can see the contrast between the two quite clearly. The book is far more insulting than the pineapple. You shouldn't be banning pineapples from universities. You should be banning religion.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many sensitive religious people when they're criticized, they act as though it's a harvest that had never been sown. Like there's nothing of their own actions that have caused them to deserve the scorn and the revulsion and so forth. I mean, if you were to take, like Rash said, the first time I read the Quran, it was just amazing to me how the person who wrote it, it was as though they had written it with like a handheld, recording device, just like a tape, and they were just pacing back and forth talking about how much they hated the unbelievers and they're this and that. And if you were to take any of those quotes about unbelievers in the Quran and replace it with Muslims and read it out of context, people would be outraged. Not just Muslims, but many of the more squeamish people. If you were to say they are a people without knowledge, and say that you were referring to Muslims, they would be pulling their hair out with rage. But that's what the Quran says about the unbelievers. I looked up a list of all of the different cases where it either insulted or threatened unbelievers, and it was over 900. I'm not making an over 9,000 joke. It literally was over 900 references. And the average copy of the Quran will run you about 300 pages. So we're talking about 3 insults or threats against non-Muslims per page. And then we wonder, and it's like, I wonder why we're having a problem with them getting along with people of other backgrounds. It's pretty clear where the clog in the drain is, so to speak. I mean, and like I said, if you were to read it, go for it.
Yeah, but this is the point, though. But back to what you're saying about how what you've both been saying about they're always criticizing the other. I mean, that is one of the fundamental characteristics of totalitarianism, like fascism. Like you will have the criticism of the other, something to rant against for nationalistic, sort of militaristic purposes. To create an enemy, so you can make people focus more on what they hate than what they love, right? So this is simple, like authoritarian rule, the control of the population, creation of the other, all these things, militarism. But this, again, like this is what separates us from them. Like they will have all these references to unbelievers in their book. I mean, I'm obviously not questioning how evil it is, a ton of that book, but I have from every religion, I know people who are perfectly reasonable. The point is, though, is that I feel it is pointless to get mired down in these debates about morality when we know we can prove that the text itself, like the moral system, is based on something which is so fallible, and that we have a superior alternative. Like argue for that instead, like this, or at least get them to combine their more traditional views that their family might have had for God knows how long, but at the same time adopt these Enlightenment values, tolerance, live and let live, these sort of attitudes. That's why I won't ban these religions. Just these people at this university, they don't understand this. Like there are some. I mean, for example, a friend of mine, Omar Al-Saini, he's from Oman. He came up to me and was like, "Oh, Muslim," but he came up to me and asked me what the pineapple was about. I mean, that was reasonable. He came up to me and said, "Okay, why do you feel that putting this pineapple in the store is necessary?" I explained my position to him, and he walked away saying, "Cool. I understand where you're coming from now. Obviously, I wouldn't do it, but I understand why, from your perspective, it made sense." And he's like, "I'll call you sometime." Like, it doesn't change the fact we might have a sit down in the pub at one point. Like, not that he's going to drink, of course, but it's like I said, it's just it's not less about the distinction between Muslims and non-Muslims or Christian and non-Christian. It's about the distinction between moral and immoral people, sane and insane people. That's the distinction that concerns me more. Like I said, that's where I'm coming from. It's we need to make sure that we emphasize not what's wrong, because ultimately there are a million ways you can miss something. Like it's like there's only one place you need to hit in order to get a bullseye. Like there's a truth, and then like screw everything else. Like this tolerant, scientific, advanced society is what we should try to be making everyone to either accept or actively uphold, and then just forget everything else. Yeah, that's.
I think it isn't under Sharia-based law that if you're a Muslim living in another country, you have to abide by the laws of that country. So, for example, you can't stone adulterers and you can't stone apostates and so on. So, surely under that basis that I've heard argued by scholars on TV, shouldn't they be permitting people to name pineapples Muhammad? Because that's legal in our country. You know, they can't kill homosexuals, throw them off the tallest building or anything, because that's illegal in the UK. Whereas prohibiting people from naming pineapples is illegal in the UK, so they shouldn't be trying to do it.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? It means that there's only two ways you can look at this. Either they're being a bad Muslim, or they're feeling that the people who made, well, I'm talking about obviously people who made a criticism here, either being a bad Muslim or they feel that jihad is necessary. And they replace that with jihad and say, we have to change the laws of this country. And if their idea of jihad is forcing someone to remove a pineapple, I'd say they've really underused the concept. Like,
I think it's a lot simpler than that, though. I think it's as simple as this. First of all, you've just got the general Salafis, who are just people who are reactionary, people who feel motivated and like the system has got it out for them because, you know, oh yes, the evil West oppressing everyone. And so whenever someone insults Muhammad, for them it activates this greater narrative of evil West and oppression of Islam. Or they're just from some lower socioeconomic background, from these crappy ghetto Muslim communities that developed following the 1950s and 60s. And again, it's simply... they just get offended. It has nothing to do with the greater stealth jihad. It has nothing. It even has nothing to do with the Quran or anything. It's just sort of like a cheap ideology that they cling to. You know, like I don't think it has to be anything more than that.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you point out the sort of the low socioeconomic backgrounds, because I remember reading somewhere that something maybe close to 90% of the Taliban, the people who the actual insurgents fighting the Americans in Afghanistan, might simply just be tribesmen. People aren't fighting because of religious ideology, but simply because Americans are occupying their land. That's it. Like that's why I'm saying I can understand some of the criticisms. Obviously, nowhere near all of them, but it's hard. Life is hardly ever black and white. Like we have this ideology which is fundamentally broken, at least it's taken to like a logical extreme, or you know, and at the same time, American imperialism, where they're hardly any better. Like, I can't believe that this, you know, in the second decade of the 21st century, they still.
I'm not even saying that what that their criticisms of the West are true. I'm just saying that in their ideology, they perceive the West as oppressing.
There's a conception of it. But what I'm getting at wasn't about that. It was about the fact that they're still arguing about things like abortion now. Like, they're hardly better. Like the Republicans of the American Taliban. Like they're so, it's crazy. Like, we have so many people in the West who are just as nuts, who are Christian extremists. Like, you have people in America obviously blowing up abortion clinics. And, like, you never hear the mainstream media in the United States call this terrorism. Because in their minds, it's always Muslims who are doing terrorism. Yet how is, just because a Christian doing it, how is someone blowing up an abortion clinic not domestic terrorism? Like, that's...
Yeah, I agree. It's very, people are very quick to call it terrorism when a Muslim does it, but if a Christian does it, it's not terrorism then, because obviously they weren't a real Christian. So it's not Christian terrorism. You know, it can't be a Christian terrorist if they're not even a Christian.
I have a question. I want you to guess. In the United States of America, which group or groups commit the most acts of terrorism? Guess.
Oh, Christians.
The right wingers.
Right wingers and Christians, like
right wing Christians. Any other takers? Any other guesses?
What was the question again?
Which group or groups in the United States commit the most acts of terrorism?
Mammals.
Humans.
That's a cheap, sophist answer. Come on, name a group.
Nose breathers. Okay.
Yeah.
Squirrels.
All right. Well, the only legitimate
There's squirrels in there.
far
Christians.
right Christians. You're wrong. It's environmentalists and animal rights activists commit the most acts of
Really?
terrorism in the United States. But
Didn't know that.
at the moment, it's not popular to make a big deal out of it, so you don't hear about it.
I'm pretty sure it's the right wingers because
No. I saw a chart. I saw an official chart.
Oh.
All the terrorist attacks
Where's the distinction between terrorism and freedom fighting? Like, where's the difference? Like, for example, would you have considered it terrorism or evil if you were in Nazi-occupied France and you took a few Nazis out? These people had probably been ferried a few hundred Jews to their deaths that same day. Like, I would consider that almost a moral duty, in that the law won't punish them. Someone has to prevent them taking more lives, and it means one for the sake of hundreds. When the law, I have to take the law's place.
But
Then I consider freedom fighting.
Sorry,
Like,
but don't eco-terrorists mostly focus on vandalism and destruction of property?
yeah, but I'm just saying that their enemies are worthwhile. Like, I'm sure you guys have heard about what Shell has done recently. In the past couple of years, there's massive offshore oil, there's massive offshore reserve of oil in Nigeria. And Shell, in order to oppress their sort of unions, literally used the Nigerian military and sort of security forces. They killed thousands. I mean, if corporations, massive multinational corporations, kill thousands of people, like, no one gives a shit. But if it's, like I said, Muslims, like I said, it's at this point you might see my more left-wing leanings coming across here, but it's, like I said, I'm saying with that it's different, in that their enemy is someone more worth fighting. I mean, are we really worth fighting? We're upholding Enlightenment values. So we clearly have a problem with the Muslims here, like, because they're fighting tolerance, but they aren't fighting tolerance. Those environmentalists, well, at least some of them are fighting genuinely evil people and evil groups. Like, that's what I'm saying.
DPR. I would, for me personally, the official definition would be either targeting civilians or civilian infrastructure with the express purpose of conveying a political intention or ideology. That would be terrorism, in the most accurate sense, I would say. So it's not, it's like if you're attacking a military, it's not terrorism because it's a combative situation. But if you're attacking civilians or non-combatants or non-combatant environments, then I would say that's terrorism.
What I'm saying is just a matter of degrees. Like I said, these things are hardly ever black and white. We have to look at what people's intentions are, the context, etc., etc., etc. Like, again, I'm not saying I'm some sort of relativist, but sometimes looking into greater detail can yield greater understanding. So,
It's just in our chat in Skype. Apparently, DPR is currently in training to become a master terrorist. Oh no, he's doing a master's course in terrorism. I'm sorry.
Just a piece of trivia information. According to the iPad app Time Tree, humans share a common ancestor with pineapples that we diverged 1,369 million years ago.
Okay, really quick. In all seriousness, DPR, what is going on in that course? Tell us what you guys are studying.
Well, I don't think it's particularly relevant.
No.
The topic at hand.
I would be interested to know what. I mean, the topic at hand has been thoroughly explored. I think I'd like to know what.
Well, I would endorse the point that Sean made and criticise. Klingschor's point. In international law, there is no accepted definition of terrorism, and Sean was quite right in questioning, how do you define a terrorist as opposed to a freedom fighter? And although Klingschor did provide a definition, I don't know where it came from, people probably would generally accept that, but it's not a definition that is accepted in international law. That was the point that I was raising with Klingschor.
So how are you doing in class? Or
I'm top of the class, of course.
Really? What's a field trip in terrorism studies school? I mean, do you just drive up to the Hindu Kush Mountains and say, okay, well, here's how to strap your vest on. This is all for educational purposes, and we don't take any. Do they make you sign a waiver disavowing they have any kind of?
I think that I have to say, Almighty, you're displaying some sort of prejudice or bigotry in relation to who you consider to be potential terrorists.
Well, I'm just saying.
And seeing as you can't define what a terrorist is, which is my starting point, the idea that you seem to be associating terrorism exclusively with Islam is, I think, somewhat disturbing.
Well, you know what? If you haul out all that money, if you take out those student loans, you might as well get the best education that the sector has to offer.
In this the what is it called? 2011 National Counterterrorism Center Report on Terrorism, obviously US. The definition of terrorism given is premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational
I'm sorry, Klingschor,
groups.
I can pause you there. I accept there are definitions. What I'm saying is there is no universal accepted definition of terrorism in international law.
I'm contextualizing what was referred to when I said that the greatest number of terrorist attacks in the United States was carried out by eco-terrorists and environmentalists.
Okay.
Right. That's sort of stuff that they're referring to.
I'll have this point for you then. If I question their focus on non-combatants, like how would you define someone who is illness? Like, for example, if you had a democratic country consciously choose to elect a fascist group, someone who is elected through a system which is fundamentally predicated on tolerance, like different views, and then they abolish that system once they're elected, just like the Nazis did. And you have then civilians making shells, building weapons.
I'm sorry, Sean, to cut through you. I can give a much more topical, perennious sort of like example. The rebels in Syria, Klingschor, are they terrorists?
Wait a minute. You seem to be labouring under the perception that this doesn't matter to me. I'm not pro or against. I just put it out there as a fun fact that according to the I've got nothing to do. I don't care about this subject.
Right, that's fine. But as a general question, though, you can still answer the question, Klingschor. You can still answer the question. Are the rebels in Syria terrorists?
I don't know, and I don't care.
I mean, say they weren't.
My personal
I'd say they're freedom fighters, black and white.
Yeah, freedom
I'd say
fighters.
some of them are freedom fighters and some of them are terrorists. Because
what's the difference between them?
Well, some of them are... No, well, I would say that, let's say that the ones that are fighting for freedom and independence, and no matter what group it is, you always get the tag-alongs who are just there for the scrap.
Yeah,
and they're just hanging around. They got the rockets. They want to shoot them into some other country because they want to.
This is so fascinating about the Arab Spring, though. Like, we have these liberal and fundamentalist groups fighting side by side, like these Arab revolutionaries who are fighting for liberal democracy and sort of secular government, and then others who are fighting for sort of Islamist governance. Like, you have these two separate groups. But I'd say, fortunately, so far at least, I think since Iran, like, during the recent Arab Spring, it's the liberals as a whole have won out. That's at least turned out to be the case so far. Which, like, what makes it so fascinating at the same time, something we should be at least on the whole grateful for. Because it's better than the governments they had before.
Well, I mean, in Libya, the Liberals won the elections, so that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. I still want to know what the coursework is in a terrorism class.
Where it involves clocks and wires and Semtex. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, in all seriousness, is it mostly just... is the bulk of it case studies of history of different incidents and groups and their backgrounds and their motives?
It's a general consideration of international law and how it applies to quote unquote, and I hate using that expression, terrorism. Because, as I say, terrorism is not defined, and well, it's defined in many places, but it tends to be defined by the winners. And there is a huge question as to what is terrorism and what is a freedom fighter, and what is a terrorist and what is someone who is seeking self-determination. It looks also at all of the treaties that are in place, of which there are thousands. The powers and the United Nations and the implementation of these treaties and how they are policed, and the International Court of Justice, for example. So it involves all of these sort of issues. I mean, take any, and also, topically again, the issue of extradition. We've recently offloaded 5 alleged terrorists over to the United States after about 12 years of toing and froing in the courts in this country. What are the laws in relation to that? And things such as the law of war, which I've always found absolutely fascinating. What are you entitled to do? To what extent does the Geneva Convention actually impact on these things? And again, how is that policed? How is that enforced? So those are the sorts of issues that are involved in the courts.
So when the suicide bombing instructor gets to the front of the class, does he say, "Okay, now everyone, I really need you to pay attention because I'm only going to show you this once"?
I have to say, the first lesson I went in, or the first seminar I went into, the first 2 people into the room were Mustafa and Abdullah. Both of them had backpacks on them, and I thought, I'm doing a course on terrorism, but that's terribly prejudiced.
Yeah, well, it's only suspicious if they don't talk to anyone else in the class, and you drop a pen, it rolls over their foot, and you're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's like, "It's fine, it's fine."
On the subject of terrorism, there was a Quilliam report that was sponsored by the UK government, apparently, and the what is claimed to be the leaked report about the status of terrorism in the UK. There's a section called Wahhabist Influence Groups and Mosques. Wahhabism is a trend within Islam which is associated with stripping away cultural manifestations of Islam and imposing extremely conservative social values, which in a British context may threaten integration and national cohesion. And then it goes on to list a number of Wahhabist influenced groups. And in this list, there's a bullet point, and it's Green plus Chambers Consulting. And if you know anything about IERA, that is Abdurrahim Green and Timothy Chambers. They've got a company called Green and Chambers Consulting, and they're listed in the government report as a Wahhabist-sponsored group.
And guess who was the signatory of the accounts of IERA? That would be Timothy. What was his second name? Timothy Chambers. Yeah. His signatory is on the IERA accounts. You and I both know Rationalizer. What a incestuous web IERA has, but hey, probably not the best time to go there.
No, just for the record, I'm not saying that IERA have terrorist links or even freedom fighter links. I'm not saying anything like that. I just thought it was really amusing that reading through a government paper about fighting extremism and counter-terrorism measures in the UK, and then you look through the list and Green and Chambers are on there. I mean, if Green and Chambers are the kind of threat that we have to national security, things aren't as bad as the news are making out. So Green and Chambers are walking down the road and go, "Oh no, here comes the Muslim threat." Yeah. It's like, no, it's just Anthony and Tim. Just calm down.
All right, I think we've gone on long enough. We're going to wrap it up. I'd like to thank Sean, who was thankfully able to join us in the final leg of the show, and also our regular guest, our regular co-host, Rationalizer Klingschor, and also thank you to DPR and Photon. We're always glad to get input from you, and for everyone who watches this on Blog TV and puts jokes in the chat that I steal shamelessly, like I stole Nim's joke earlier about the suicide bombing teacher. And to everyone who watches it on YouTube, we always thank you for your support, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
And remember to subscribe. You can find us on Facebook and on Twitter as well.
And
check
also
it out.
iTunes. We're now on iTunes as well. If you search for the word Jinn, Jinn, on iTunes, you'll see the podcast, The Gin and Tonic Show.
And it's a shame that you're ending just as you've been featured. You've now got 570 viewers, but you're ending the show. Hey.
Additionally,
thank you very much for having me.
The punishment, I forgot to mention this, probably important since the subject's blasphemy. Generally speaking, throughout history, in Islam, Sunni Islam, under the orthodox schools of jurisprudence or fiqh, the general punishment for blasphemy was the death penalty.
It's funny how Klingschor can make the word fiqh sound like a sexual act. Right, we're off then. See you later.
So sexy.
In German, fiqh means fuck. So,
classic.